Welcome, everyone. The Eastham Conservation Commission will hold a hybrid public meeting on Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, MGL, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 to 25, Open Meeting Law, MGL Chapter 131, Section 40, Wetlands Protection Act, and Chapter 155 of the Code of the Town of Eastham, Eastham Wetlands Protection Bylaw. And before we start, this meeting is being aired on Public Access Channel 8 and will be available on the town's website at www.eastham-ma.gov. I'm going to ask you please to remain mute unless it is your turn to speak and to let me know if you will be recording the meeting. I'm going to take attendance and then we'll start. Janet Benjamin is not here tonight. Joanne Cossett?
Here.
Greg Douglas?
Here.
Mike Harnett?
Here.
Chuck Wagner?
Here.
And Karen Strauss, I am here. First up tonight is a request for determination of applicability filed by Campground Realty LLC. Applicant proposes to rebuild existing deck, add a 12 by 12 foot porch next to the deck, and bump out to the right front of the house and install a new septic system at property located at 525 Campground Road, map 07, parcel 361. And who's here to speak on that? If you're here to speak, you should unmute and let me know.
Yep, I'm here for Campground. Robert McCarthy.
Okay. So
Yes.
if you want to give us an overview of the project. You're not the engineer, right?
No,
Yes,
I'm the
Jason.
Contractor that's doing work on it.
Okay. Okay, so if you could identify yourself for the record, and then if you'd like to give us an overview.
Sure. Robert McCarthy, McCarthy Carpentry Services out of Dennis. There's an existing deck. We wanted to bump it out about another 1.5 feet and then add a 3-season porch next to that in line with the existing building at 12 by 12. And then the front of the same side of the house, just bump it about 4 feet to the front, keeping in line with the existing building. Not taking any more, to the right or left. And then the septic he's got an engineer for that, but he's doing that out front. The pump up system.
Mm-hmm. So Jason Ellis is the engineer. He's not able to be here tonight.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, because we might have some questions for him as well.
Yeah, the homeowner knows a little more about that. And he's supposed to be on here. I just sent him.
Okay.
But I don't see him here.
Okay. I know some of the commission was out for a site visit this morning, and our agent sent me some photos of the site, and it looks like that there's already been some disturbance and digging on the property. Can you explain that?
Yeah, the front, just along the front foundation, we were just digging the dirt away so we could get at the siding.
The photos make it look a little more extensive, but let me go to somebody who's at the site visit and they can start us off. But Greg, do you want to take this?
Sure. Basically, the site had several different activities going on. There was some digging around the front of the foundation and around the sides, and where the proposed bump out, the bump out room would have been. It looked like there was some plans for some type of dry well system from what we could see. And there were several other larger holes in the back, which looked like more additional dry well units were planning on being installed. So there was quite a bit of activity there with respect to what they're doing.
Yeah, the homeowner had a little shovel because I told him I couldn't get at the front of the house because the grade was right at the siding to side and put a couple windows in, which I already had a permit for. So he dug, because we're putting Bigfoot footings back there. And he was just digging to start them. He didn't go down 4 feet or nothing. He was just, since he had the shovel, it was a little mini excavator.
And
because
what kind of footings were they? I was just curious.
Well, they're going to be, Bigfoots.
Okay.
To carry the load on the 12x12 porch, and two Bigfoots right out front.
I'm here too, the owner, Mike Escoda. Sorry about that. I'm late, but hi.
Hi.
Yeah, Mike's the homeowner that does a lot of construction himself. I'm just I'm the carpenter, doing the addition, and I'm here, because I needed to get a permit.
So anyways, there seems to be quite a bit of activity, and it appears that the property is within the flood zone. Is that
the buffer zone?
The buffer zone. And I didn't see any staking, but
I just signed a proposal today with GMF to do the septic, and he is. I waited to do that because I knew he was going to do that. I was going to stake it out. And then I was advised to wait for him to just do the whole property because it is in the proposal for him to stake out everything.
Good. So that's pretty much what we saw. Karen, that's about all I can tell you right now.
Okay, I'm just gonna say that normally that we expect the property to be staked before the public hearing for the permit.
Right.
That makes that when the commission comes out for a site visit, that makes it that lays out the proposed work so that the commission can easily evaluate where you plan to do it. And
right.
And so that has to be done before the hearing and not later on when the contractor comes. And it needs to be in place when the contractor is going to do work so that the pre-construction meeting or whatever has the site staked out so everybody is clear where everything is going to go. But it has to be done before we have a permit hearing.
Okay.
So just so you know. And then any work on the project at all needs to wait until after a permit is issued. So you can't go pre-digging for footings or anything else until you come before the commission. We discuss it and we issue a permit with conditions.
Okay.
Okay, so just keep that in mind for future projects.
Right. As far as the siding and windows, I already got a permit for that. It's just,
but that
right.
Right.
The addition, right.
That's for work right up on the house and not for the area around the house. So, and anything within the Conservation Commission jurisdiction,
right, I guess,
needs to be approved before anything gets done.
Yeah,
so.
Like I said, he just had the mini excavator, so he was just starting it a little bit. I guess we shouldn't have done that. But
yeah,
he didn't fully do.
So I do have a couple of questions. The cesspool is going to be is that going to be removed?
That's going to be
completely,
removed. That's going to be removed, and I just signed the proposal today with GMF to do the AEI tank system, and that's going to go in the front of the property where those trees are. That tree will be gone, and they're going to build up kind of a mound that will double as a leaching field and as parking. And they're going to build it up the plan is to build it up with earth and boulders and use that as parking and the leaching field.
So that would be work consistent or exactly what you're permitting before us? Or are
Yes.
they doing a different plan than what
No,
has
that is
been?
the plan. That is the septic plan you have is the septic plan I gave to GMF and everyone else that I shopped at.
Okay, so you are completely removing the
Cesspool in the
exist
back.
and filling it with clean sand? Is that the?
Is that yeah, I mean he would I haven't just
Okay.
on the estimate all it says is remove existing cesspool. If that's I mean is if sand's required, that's what we'll use, whatever is required.
Okay, I'm wondering if we might need to continue this hearing until the engineer can join us. Hillary, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I was gonna just add that they generally pump them and then fill them with clean sand, but if you want the actual beehive structure removed, then we should specify that the beehive structure gets removed and then it gets filled in with clean sand.
Okay, what's your thought on that?
I prefer to see them removed rather than sitting in the ground, but sometimes it becomes an issue with space and equipment, and if it can be removed, it should be. If not, then we just fill it with sand.
I think it could be removed. I know it is like, you know, it's in the ground and it's in like a thicket of bush, but yeah, whatever, either way, I'll comply either way.
Okay, so that I guess we could permit it as a. How do we permit that as a
Removal if possible.
removal? Okay.
I
And
know,
then the other.
I know that he went there to look. I had a few companies go there and look at it, and GMF did go there, and he did not mention anything to me, but on the estimate it did say remove cesspool. So
Okay.
I'm just assuming that he looked at it and he thought it was doable. So I will confirm that with him, but he probably would have specified if it was need to be filled with sand. But I think, but on the estimate, it did say removal of existing cesspool.
Okay, and then the other question was about vegetation removal and how much vegetation is getting removed for these
Just
projects?
just the trees in the front. There's really no bushes being removed or anything really on the sides of the house. Rob, I don't really think so, right?
No,
Okay.
not for the porch, no.
Yeah, no, just those trees.
Okay, we usually require mitigation of 2 to 1 for any vegetation removal or disturbance.
Okay.
So you can plant a couple of trees.
So we could condition that for how many trees are getting removed?
I believe it's
It's
2, right, Rob? But they're like, aren't they
2 big pines, yeah,
2 big pines? Yeah.
by the street. Right?
Right by right by the street, right next to where the outhouse is.
You could plant a couple nice, nice trees.
Well, yeah, that's essentially where that parking, that leaching field and that mound will go for the parking.
Okay, so trees would have to be located elsewhere.
Right. You could put it to the left.
Right.
There's no parking. You could put a couple of trees.
Yep.
Okay, so we're looking at you taking out 2 big pines and replacement with 4 native trees.
Yeah.
Of your choice.
Okay.
Okay, any questions, other questions from the commission?
None from me.
Well, the commission.
So, yeah, sorry.
We do have a vacancy, but at the moment. So we also have special conditions for septic upgrades. Have you had a chance to see that?
I have not.
Okay, I can just go through them real quickly. So the general conditions are informing the contractor engineer, the project engineer, and all contractors, including landscape contractors, must be informed of the conditions. The applicant is responsible for compliance with this order of condition, and a copy of the order of conditions and a set of approved plans must be on site at all times. Qualified contractors, the approved project shall be entirely completed by professional qualified contractors whose business and experience includes marine construction and, as necessary, landscaping, including planting and maintenance of native vegetation. A record of contractors employed shall be maintained by the owner applicant and made available to the Conservation Commission upon 48 hours verbal or written notice. No work may proceed until all other permits required by law, such as building permits, Board of Health, Planning Board, Board of Appeals, are received. Right of entry, the Conservation Commission and or conservation agent shall have the right of entry during the period of the open order to inspect the property to determine and evaluate compliance with provisions of this order. Liability, the applicant and or owner agree that the allowances of the construction of the particular structure by the issuance of the permit shall not in any way obligate the town or any state or federal agency to protect the structure from natural forces of storm damage, erosion, and flood hazard, nor to furnish a suitable freshwater drinking source. Approval plans and supporting documents. All details on approved plans shall be strictly adhered to. Any proposed changes to the plans of record shall be reviewed with the Conservation Commission prior to any change implementation, who shall determine in the filing of a revised plan if the filing of a revised plan or a new filing is required. It is understood that no other work is to occur on the parcel other than what is shown on the approved plans. Any new activities may require review by the Commission of the resource area and activity. During the construction period, work notice to the Conservation Department shall be notified by telephone 48 hours before beginning any work. The construction protocol, as noted on the approved plans and supporting documents, shall be strictly adhered to. The limit of work is shown on the approved plan. No access or material storage shall be allowed beyond the limit of work as shown on the plan. Limit of work shall be delineated at the site and shall be inspected daily and maintained. All details on approved plans shall be strictly adhered to. Any proposed changes to the plan of record shall be reviewed with the Conservation Commission prior, who shall determine if the filing of a revised plan or new filing is required. It is understood that no other work is to occur on the parcel other than what is shown on the approved plans. Mechanized equipment used for the project shall be kept in good working condition and inspected daily for any possible hazards such as leaks. Mechanized equipment shall be stored in designated areas and shall utilize approved access corridor if applicable, as shown on the approved site plan. Mechanized equipment shall be provided on site with absorbent response materials to protect against petrochemical leaks. If the hazard is observed, the machinery involved shall be removed from the resource area or buffer zone and be repaired before returning to the work site. Worker parking, toilets, construction materials, storage areas shall be located at the locust property unless otherwise authorized under site-specific staging permit. And construction materials, there shall be no storage of construction materials or debris in the resource area. Construction materials and all debris of any kind, including stones and timber, shall be kept in covered containers and shall be removed in a timely manner. The site must be inspected daily by the contractor to ensure there is no loose debris on site, and all loose debris, including demolition debris, must be stored in a covered container in the driveway and removed when full. And that is the end of that. Any questions about that?
No.
No,
Okay, so if there's no more questions from the commission, if we might have a motion for a positive 2A and a negative 3 with the cesspool to be removed entirely if possible and filled, and then with mitigation to be 4 native trees of the homeowner's choice. And the special conditions for septic replacements as described. Is there a second?
second.
Okay, Joanne,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Mike,
Mostly sunny,
Chuck.
wet, with a high of 60 degrees Fahrenheit and a low of 43 degrees.
Could everybody who's not speaking please mute? Mike,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
and I am a yes. Okay, thank you. You are done. The Conservation Commission will send out a permit when it's ready.
Thank you.
Okey-doke, thank you.
Okay. Next up is a request for determination of applicability filed by Timothy Baker Trust. Applicant proposes to remove existing tight tank and well at property located at 305 Nauset Light Beach Road, map 23, parcel 018.
Good evening, Lynn Hamlin with Hamlin Consulting. The commission issued an order of conditions in December of 2023, allowing the existing or then existing dwelling to be relocated further back in the property in response to the eroding coastal bank. But that coastal bank is eroding at such a rapid rate that that project became untenable. So the property is now being donated to the Eastham Conservation Foundation, but as a stipulation for their acceptance of the property, they're requiring that the septic system, which is a tight tank, and the well be removed. So this application is strictly for the removal of those two items, and then the property will be turned over to the Eastham Conservation Foundation. I spoke to the contractor, Robert Childs, who will be doing the work, and the structures nicely are located in the existing drive. So all they have to do is back up with an excavator, pull them out, put them in a truck, drive away and dispose of them properly. They'll fill the holes with clean medium sand. The foundation, if you're out there, has already been removed. That was done per consultation with the staff under the existing order. And I think it's pretty straightforward. I hope you stayed away from the cliff because it's all concave and eroded out there.
So it's come to my attention, Alex Bates, and I talked this afternoon, that the foundation was removed without notifying the Conservation Department ahead of time and without an on-site pre-construction meeting.
That was all done when I got involved. I had spoken to Alex, and I was under the impression that they were in consult with the staff, but I have no information about that.
Okay, Alex is going to follow up with that later. I just wanted to get that.
Yeah, it
out
looks
there.
fine. It doesn't, there was no, the site doesn't look disturbed. It looks just like the house was just removed. And there was no native vegetation there. Everything's going to fall over the cliff sooner than later anyway.
Okay. I know that some of the commission was out for a site visit. Does anybody from who was out there have any comment, questions?
This is Greg.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, we were out there. It looked good, actually. I mean, it looked like all the material had been removed and the foundation had been filled with sand. And I think that the removal of the well and the septic system or the tank should be relatively easy. It's not as close to the bank as the other parts of the property. So it should work out fine.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
Can I just ask, when was the house removed? Recently, right? Within the last couple of months?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Apparently March 25th or so.
Was that okay? Yeah, just making sure. I noted that the house is closer, so the logic was, since the house is closer, this should also be very easy. Just making sure it's all happening within the same time frame. Obviously, with concerns about the stability of the bank and getting all that equipment in there. But it sounds like they recently removed the house, so the well itself should not be an issue. So that seems to solve it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to note that the house actually burned down in a fire on Thanksgiving of 2024.
That's
and what was removed was the foundation.
Foundation, yeah.
Okay. So we have for this special conditions for septic upgrades was that right? As well. And I just went through them. Are you familiar with them?
Here-
Do you need me to review them again?
We're removing the septic tank. It's a tight tank and it's
And, yeah,
moved, right? We're not putting any
okay.
septic in.
Well, it's the same basic conditions in terms of where you're working and putting materials and notifying the conservation office and so on. So that would be in the conditions. Okay. So, all right. So if we could have a motion for a positive 2A and a negative 3 with the special conditions for septic.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Okay, Joanne,
yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have an after the fact request for determination of applicability filed by Patricia McDonald. Applicant proposes to remove and replace existing retaining walls, remove 3 red cedar trees, move native trees from front yard to the backyard, move ornamental plants from the backyard to the front yard, overgrown foundation plantings to be removed and replaced with 6 semi-dwarf rhododendrons, apply compost, jute netting, wood chips in disturbed area, and plant with native vegetation at property located at 230 Goody Hallett Drive, map 20, parcel 021. And who's going to speak on this?
Patricia McDonald, I'm here at the hearing room.
Okay. Would you like to give us any more, a quick overview of the project and maybe explain why it's an after the fact filing?
Sure. What happened was we were basically transplanting plants all over the place. Partly because the foundation plantings in the front of the house were overgrown and touching onto the shingles, so we had to move them out. In the back, there was, Alex had been out to see this, there was a strange kind of viewing platform that the previous owner had put overlooking the marsh, but it was basically falling apart. It was supported by cylindrical concrete things. They weren't inserted in the ground, they were just sitting on top of the ground. And then they had just boards on top with a wood railing, and all of those were essentially falling apart. So we removed that structure and removed the concrete, and there actually was, they had used like a plastic, almost like edging piece to kind of hold the bank in place. So we removed that plastic as well, and basically just completed, it stayed at the same grade as it was before, but we sort of filled in where they had put the concrete things with loam, and then planted on that surface with sweet fern and golden groundsel, which we previously put on the bank, and it's worked pretty well. So we're hoping that will serve as a way of preventing any erosion in that area. I don't know if you have other specific questions. There was also a retaining wall back there that the original owner had put in to provide access to a garage that was under the house. And that retaining wall was built out of pressure treated railroad ties that were put in 1983. So they were falling apart, kind of deteriorating. So those were removed and taken away, and we put up instead a, I forget what they call it, there's a specific kind of engineered stone that we put to replace it. But it was a 1-for-1 replacement of the retaining wall by the garage.
Okay. Hey, Mike, you're in the meeting room. I'm hearing a lot of background noise. Is that from the meeting next door? And are the doors to the room you're in shut?
No.
Could you shut them, please? Okay. So just wanting to know, you did why the work was done without a getting a permit? I know that you filed with us before. There was that Phragmites project in particular.
Right.
So I'm wondering,
It was my mistake. I honestly didn't think I needed to for that because it was basically improving the area in the back that had this unnecessary structure and just putting in native plants there instead. But my mistake for not asking ahead of time.
okay. Okay, and I guess we'd like to know where was the compost sourced that you used?
From Brewster Sand and Gravel.
And then you removed some trees.
The tree, yeah, there were 3 cedars in the front of the house. They were lining what had been the previous driveway to go down to that under house garage. And what happened was the previous owner had tied the trunks of those cedars with plastic rope. And I guess his intention was to keep them straight. But what ended up happening was that as the trees grew, the rope ended up girdling the trunks of each of those trees, so that the top half of the cedar was essentially dead and dying. So we removed those and we moved instead a couple of native rhododendrons, one of which had been near the house, into that spot instead.
Okay, so we usually require mitigation when trees are removed.
Okay.
So I think we'd expect that here. And before we go further, I'm going to ask if any of the commission, particularly if you're out for the site visit, would like to speak. So Greg?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, we're out this morning, and yeah, there was quite a bit of revegetation going on at the site, and we didn't. It seemed like it was being done properly from our perspective, but 2 areas of concern, at least, were for example, the work on the bank. It looked very nice, but it needs to be taken. Someone needs to take a look at it. And then there was the construction of a wall. A block wall, which was replacing a wall that had already been there for many, many years. But the description of the site is consistent with their July 7th letter of what they planted and the materials. And it looked like many of them are, we didn't do a counting, but many were native species. So.
Hillary?
I was just going to add that Alex and I had been out there, I think a week or so ago, and the work was done really quite well. The banking where they pulled things out and revegetated did have jute netting on it and some looked like shredded up leaves laid down to keep it from eroding. So the work was done well. The plants are native and the homeowners were very in tune with that. So I think despite the fact that they did not file the application first, the work, is in compliance with what we would be looking for.
Okay, and in terms of the mitigation for the trees, do you have any thoughts on that?
Don't, because it looks like they put a lot of new vegetation in and they moved trees around. So I'm not even sure there would be an actual viable place to put 2 trees. But we can certainly go back out and work with them. If there is a place, then we would, certainly look for that. But it's pretty well vegetated and they just dug things up and moved them around.
Okay, so we might permit this as that the agent should have another site visit, and if it seems suitable, that a couple of native trees would be planted to replace the cedars. Does that sound reasonable to the homeowners as well?
Sure. As Hillary mentioned, the site in the back doesn't really have a lot of room for trees because there already are a lot of trees there. There's some oaks and cedars and a couple of other trees back there. But in the front, there's room if they want the trees there, and we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, and that's why we'd make it conditional so that there could be an agreement on a suitable site and more analysis of whether that might be necessary given the amount of vegetation that you have and what you've planted. Okay. Anything else from the commission? Okay, then if we want to have a motion, I think this would be a positive 2B and a negative 3 with, give me 1 second. Yeah, positive 2B, a negative 3 with an additional on-site from the agent to determine whether some additional tree mitigation is required. So if somebody would like to make a motion.
So moved.
And is there a second? Okay. Greg?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay. Thank you. That Alex will be in touch.
Thank you for your help.
And next up, we have a certificate of compliance filed by Keith and Erin Johnson for SE 19-1898 for removing and installing a new outdoor kitchen, pergola, and patio, install new stockade fence, reconfigure existing walkway, extend existing cable railing, resurface existing deck, and manage invasive species with native species at property located at 15 West Road, map 4, parcel 481. And no work has been done on this, and the homeowners are looking to close out the order. So unless the homeowners wish to make any comments on this, I will just ask the commission to make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Chuck?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And then we have an administrative review filed by Keith and Erin Johnson. Applicant proposes to remove outdoor kitchen and plant area with 6 beach plums and beach grass at property located at 15 West Road, map 04, parcel 481. And just the homeowner want to speak on this, or? No, okay. Any questions from the commission? And Greg?
Yeah, we were out there this morning, and it looks like a good idea because they're going to remove some non-pervious area where the cooking and the outdoor kitchen is, and replace them with the beach plums. It seems pretty straightforward.
Any other comments? Okay, so if we might have a motion to approve with 24 hours notice to the Conservation Department and temporary above ground irrigation for 1 year. And is there a second?
Second.
Joanne?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Okay, the permit is approved. Next up, we have an administrative review filed by Lawrence Wasco. Applicant proposes to replace bottom of beach stairs at property located at 105 and 125 Shortlift Road, map 10, parcel 237 and 238. And I see the applicant is here. If you'd like to just state who you are for the record.
Yeah, hi, this is Lawrence Wasco. Yeah, I mean, I've detailed it in the plans, and I was here at, anyway, what we have is a set of aluminum steps that straddle an embankment. Most of it is, the bottom portion of the aluminum steps is over the rocks, the retaining wall, to the beach. And as the beach has eroded over the years, we've had a small section of wooden steps there that this winter Mother Nature decided to take on her own. We have found them. We found them further down on Kingsbury Beach area. But they're unusable. They were ripped out, and after years of working with the water against the water and the tides, we have to rebuild them. So that's what I'm looking to do and get. I did, like I said, I put out a set of plans. I've talked to Alex about this, and he suggested I include a picture and what the steps look like without the steps, without those bottom steps, and where I plan to put them. There are also some other areas of repair that we'd like to make. There are some bolts and hardware that have corroded over time, and we'd like to just, make sure that people know we want to replace that as well as or fix it where necessary on the aluminum steps. So, but anyway, that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. So, about the replacement bottom steps, they're going to be aluminum, you said. Are they going to be anchored in place, or do you plan them to be seasonal?
They're not going to be aluminum right now.
Oh,
Right now
I
they're
thought
just
that
going to
was, okay.
no, just non-pressure treated spruce or whatever acceptable wood that we can use. We're going to make them out of that. The plan is to build a set of sturdy steps for now so that people can
Mhm.
get down to the beach. And we've been working with Anchor Marine, Chris from Anchor Marine, and they're so swamped. Nobody can get to us right now to do anything. So we're planning on putting an aluminum portion of steps there in the fall.
Okay, and that would be a separate filing.
That would be, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So any comments from the commission?
Can I ask Karen, I just want to make sure, so the plan, temporary wooden steps, then aluminum steps go in, are those aluminum steps, I mean, in your opinion, are they also seasonal and that piece of section is just going to be removed, or are they capable of standing up to the winter weather as well? Kind of in your opinion, how likely is it that they could be taken out by storms?
Hopefully, the ideal situation would be a set of aluminum steps and that's a small section that we could just haul up, not necessarily haul up, but slide
Mhm.
up, so that it gets away. It's just these bottom steps that get, when high tide comes up, there's no beach there. The water comes all the way up to the rocks, and these steps, they get submerged. So, but it's not so much the tide; it's the ice flow of the ice back and forth that really took its toll on those wood steps. Yeah, ideally, we haven't worked out the plans with Anchor Marine yet. We've been talking to them, and they've given us some ideas, but they just said let's get together in the fall. And
So
that
can we
would be ideal.
can we maybe agree that we're going to try the removable steps then for this project?
Either removable or something that's, you slide up to the next
Slides up,
section.
yeah, something that removes itself from the line, the water line.
I'm all for it. Yeah, I'm all for it because it's just going to be trouble if you don't. Yeah.
Okay, so we have permitted retractable steps before along the bayside that slide back up into the upper part of the staircase above the high tide base flood elevation kind of line. So,
Is
but
that
for
it?
this, yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Is that information available? Like I don't know. It'd be interesting to be able to go and see those steps or something like that. I wonder.
Mhm. I'm sure that perhaps Amy at the conservation office might be able to help
Oh, okay.
identify.
Okay.
So what we're talking about now is some replacement wooden steps that you're thinking of temporary, but for the moment, we will consider as permanent until you have a new filing to replace, as you've discussed. And they're going to be built in and anchored in place.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
Just one question. So Karen, are we putting a time limit on then how long those steps can be? Should we make that part of the permit?
Well, it sounds like they're being built in a way that would be acceptable for a permanent set of steps, just basically replacing in kind. Is that correct?
The plan is to probably take them out in October or November, because they're just gonna, especially if we're not using pressure treated, I'll be honest with you, I don't see them holding up. You know, they may make it through a winter, but you never know. So why don't we just take them
I'd
out?
be, yeah, just based on what you just said, I would be more comfortable if those steps came out, because if they were already, I know the old ones were old and they were taken out, but if there's a chance the new ones could become debris, I'd rather, like, I don't know what the other commissioners feel. I'd rather kind of condition this on these come out in like October, November, something, so that they don't end up in the bay again.
Well, I know a lot of people like to use them, you know, people walk down the beach in October and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of steps that are wooden steps that go down still. So I don't know if I'd want to take them out until at least sometime in November. You know,
Okay.
it's before the ice comes anyway. But
So
not too soon.
when we permit seasonable steps, you expect them to be pulled out by November 15th, and we allow them back in April 15th or after.
Yeah.
So if we conditioned that, these steps would come out in November and not be reinstalled until April
Hopefully they won't be
15th. Well,
yeah, I know what you're saying. You got to put a limit on it. Yeah.
that if we're going to call them seasonal, basically here, which it seems like that makes a lot of sense given the potential debris situation, that we would put some dates in there.
I mean, the
But
last
if
set
you're,
of steps we built lasted 25 years. I mean, I
that's
can't
a
believe
long
it. Well,
time.
it's not really I think it can't be 25, but it was a long time. I find it hard they're going to be wiped out in the winter. But we're up, that being said, I didn't expect these to get wiped out. They were not shoddy. They were not, torn apart or anything like that. So nobody expected these to get removed by Mother Nature. So, but I would have more faith in aluminum steps, which is what we're getting. It's a Beach Plum Beach Association. It's an association. We have a lot of members. I don't think we want to mess around with stuff that's too temporary. We want to get a permanent solution in place. So that's our goal for sometime in the fall. So however you want to stipulate on, but we need work because we can't use the steps. They're pretty high up
I
right now.
understand. Yeah, and it's no fun having beach access that you can't use.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at calling these seasonal steps to be removed by November 15th and not to be replaced before April 15th. And let's see. Sorry, just pulling up my notes. Okay, so if we want to make a motion to approve the administrative review with 24 hours notice to the Conservation Department, with the steps to be seasonal removal by November 15th, not to be reinstalled before April 15th. Hillary?
Just one question. I want to make sure I have it right. So if they're wooden stairs, we will allow the wooden stairs to come back after April 15th. We're not requiring the aluminum stairs after April 15th, but sometime in the future.
Yes, well, we're
Okay.
not requiring the aluminum stairs at all. I
Okay.
think that is something that the Beach Association wants to do, but for the moment, we're only concerned with these stairs.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so if we could have a motion to approve with 24 hours notice to the Conservation Department and with the stairs to be seasonal, removed by November 15th and not to be reinstalled before April 15th of each year.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Chuck,
Yes.
Greg?
Yeah.
Mike,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
and I am a yes. Okay, there you go, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, and next we have continuation of after the fact administrative review filed by 150 Old State Highway Cottages LLC. Applicant proposes to install a fence at property located at 150 State Highway, map 20, parcel 114. And do we have Gary Vecchione? I see we have his attorney here, but I don't see Gary.
Good evening. Gary should be online. I'll check to see, but I know Laura Schofield is here as well, I believe, who's on behalf of Gary also.
Is she
She's just-
behalf of him on the fence, or we haven't opened the septic yet?
No, just on the septic part of it. But I'm happy to speak to the fence while, unless you want to give us a second while I get Gary here.
Yeah, we could pause for a few
And-
minutes.
Since you do have other items on the agenda tonight, if while we're waiting for Gary, would it be permissible to the board if we were held, or to the commission if we were held after the septic went forward, just to do it all in one time, just to be apologetic and considerate of the other items on the agenda?
Karen, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, so I think we could hold this and the septic one for Gary to join us and move ahead with the next item on the agenda.
I
And then
appreciate
we'll
that.
check back in with you after that.
Thank you kindly.
So moving along, notice of intent filed by Cape Holden Realty Trust. Applicant proposes to construct a new family dwelling at property located at 339 Dyer Prince Road, map 19, parcel 111.
Good evening, Madam Chair, David Little. I'm representing the applicants. The property is located on the south side of Dyer Prince Road, and it's in the buffer zone to a salt marsh and located within the flood zone AE elevation 13. The property's been on the market for quite a while, and I'm working for two people that would like to purchase the property and build a modest house. The work includes the construction of a 2-bedroom dwelling, the installation of a Title V sewage disposal system, which incorporates IA technology, and landscaping. The work occurs within the buffer zone to the salt marsh, on land subject to coastal storm flowage, and within the inner Cape Cod Bay ACEC. The dwelling will be constructed on a crawl space foundation with a finished floor elevation of 14.25 to comply with the building code requirements. And flood vents will be located in the foundation walls to allow for the unobstructed flow of storm water in the event of a flood. The driveway will be pervious. The disturbed area within the limit of work will be seeded with an eco lawn, which is a mix of fescue grasses that is highly drought tolerant once established. I addressed the performance standards in my project narrative, and the lot itself is considered to be a buildable lot by the town and is assessed at over $300,000. So that being said, we've sited the house in a manner to keep it out of the 50-foot buffer zone. We are going to the Board of Health in 2 days for review of the IA system, which complies with the state Title V regulations. And that being said, I'm going to open it up to questions, which I'm sure there will be many. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to start off by mentioning that we have not yet received a DEP number or comments from NHESP. The property is within a priority habitat as well.
I have been in, Karen, I have been in contact with NHESP. I provided them additional photographs, and we did get the green card back from DEP. So, and I provided the green cards to the town today via email.
Okay. But we don't yet have comments. So
No, I understand.
Okay. And then I have questions about the ACEC here. And I note that in your narrative, you say that there are no resources within the ACEC are affected. However, under our bylaw, the ACEC is a separate resource, and we have particular ACEC regulations that govern what can happen on the property. And looking at your site plan, you show us the ACEC delineated here by a line that says elevation 10, NGVD 1929, elevation 8.8, NAVD 88, and the designation documents for this ACEC state that it generally follows the 10-foot contour. So I don't see a 10-foot contour line. Now, you know, we use NAVD 88, and I don't see a 10-foot contour line here, except this really the solid line that you're using for grading. So,
agreed. So when the ACEC was created, it was based on the USGS maps at the time, which were also based on the NGVD 1929 10-foot contour. So if you were to extrapolate the NGVD 29 10-foot contour to what we use today, NAVD 88, it's approximately a 1.2 foot difference.
okay, but
okay,
go ahead.
So the plan itself is on the NAVD 88 datum.
But the designation itself refers to the map as a general outline, and that any plans should refer to the designation itself.
Correct.
So,
and that's why I identified that contour, which is 8.8 on the NAVD 88 datum, also is elevation 10 on the NGVD 29 datum. It's and I expect that I can go into this in more detail, but I expect there are going to be several more questions. But I am comfortable with the ACEC designation.
Okay. I'm just surprised that in 2003, when this was designated, that it was still using NGVD. rather than NAVD 88, but and I wasn't able to confirm that in my own research there. But that's no matter. The house is squarely within the ACEC. And our ACEC regulations state very specifically, and this is section 6 of the wetlands regulations, additional regulations for ACEC, number 3B. No dumping, filling, paving, removing of material, dredging, or altering may be done except for projects involving salt marsh creation, beach nourishment, dune stabilization, maintenance of anadromous fish runs, or aquaculture may be authorized by the commission after the filing of a notice of intent. And I'm trying to understand where this fits into what is allowed, because certainly removal of trees for the house construction is altering, digging for foundation is altering, and so on.
To answer your question, I think the house could be moved to the northeast and moved out of the ACEC boundary. That's something that was brought to my attention subsequent to the filing. So I don't dispute your comments, and I don't dispute the regulations, but I think the house could be moved to the southeast and the septic system could be moved slightly to the west, so we could comply with those regulations.
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask if anybody, I'll come back to myself later. I'm going to ask if anybody else on the commission has comments. I know Alex had mentioned something about the high water line, and to ask Greg.
Oh, okay. Yes, the question, David, is how did you determine the extreme high tide level on the map?
So we have been working with the town of Orleans at Skaket Beach for probably 20 years now. Skaket Beach has a program where the town comes in and they re-nourish the beach every April. And we have represented the town before the Army Corps of Engineers and DEP to secure the regulations or the permits necessary to determine the number or the elevation of extreme high water. So I felt, Greg, that this not having anything else better to go on, obviously there might be rack line landward of what I've shown as extreme high water. There might be rack line seaward of what I've shown as extreme high water, but I based my information on plans that I've worked on with the town of Orleans, and I recently updated to the NAVD 88 datum, and I came up with an elevation for extreme high water that I sent the field crew out to trace. I don't say that the rack line might be higher than that in some places. That could be storm driven. I'm just trying to come up with an average extreme high water. So that's how I did that.
Okay, because this morning when we were out there, you're correct. The rack line, I mean, we saw the rack line almost up to the driveway, which is pretty far.
From. I've seen that as well.
So is that a concern? I mean, is this going to flood, or is this it's going to be hard to build a driveway where there's all this material, right?
When you get a northwest wind and the water's coming over that vast open stretch, it's going to drive it up there. But I don't necessarily say that that's an extreme high water. I say that's a storm-driven high water that is not a regular occurrence. But so I don't disagree with you. I've seen the rack line. I don't begin to suggest this is not a difficult job.
My second question was, I mean, there's a lot of cedar trees in there. It's a well-established area, and there's a lot of, you know, the typical trees you might find in that area. What kind of mediation did you plan on doing, and where would you put them?
We've tried to tie the limit of work very tight to around the proposed dwelling, but after listening to Karen's comments, I expect that I'm going to be coming back with another plan with the driveway in the same place, but with a dwelling located outside of the ACEC, and the small area where the dwelling's going to be located, I'm just proposing to put a fescue lawn in.
Okay. And do we have any idea? I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
Do we have any idea like how many trees? I mean, I don't, you know, it looked like there was a lot of cedar trees right there. Is that they're going to have to come down?
I can give you that number, Greg.
Okay, thanks. I'm all set, Karen.
No, I mean, I'm gonna have to work on generating that number for you, Greg.
Right.
So I'm just going to go back to that. So you were actually proposing no mitigation whatsoever for the tree removals and disturbance. Is that correct?
At this point, no.
Even though our regulations would require it, do require it.
I expect this to be one of many hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And the ACEC regulations were something that I was not paying that closely to. So obviously I need to, I'm just being honest, Karen.
I understand. I understand. I'm just smiling because you and I have gotten into the ACEC.
I need to address that. I have been talking with NHESP. I went to the site today to take several photos to provide to them. I think what I would request of the commission would be, one, your honest evaluation of this project that I can take back to my clients, and two, not spending too much of your time and spending too much of my time. But the difficult situation here is that the owners of the property that have owned it for a long, long time are paying taxes on a buildable lot. And there are interested buyers. And if there's a way to make this work that appeases the commission and will work for the buyers, that's where I'm coming from. But I'm not here to spend a lot of time going back and forth and back and forth. If you want to see a mitigation plan relative to removing the trees in the ACEC, I will do that.
Well, I'll tell you where I am on this. At the moment, I'm a definite no. I think the ACEC is one issue. The lack of proposed mitigation is certainly another. The fact is that you came to us with a fairly incomplete plan, knowing as our regulations do require mitigation for these things. And as for the ACEC, you and I have gotten into that a few previous times where it's been left off the plan. So the regulations have been in effect for quite some time, and that we have to have another hearing because the plan submitted doesn't meet the performance standards of our regulations is an issue, certainly.
And I apologize. I apologize for that. But as you said at the on-site, we don't have a file number and we haven't heard from NHESP. So
right. So we would have to continue in any case. But
right.
But I am at this point a no for the project. And I'll certainly open it up to anybody else on the commission who wants to make comments or has questions. before we move on.
I'd like to
Joanne
make-
and, oh, Greg, sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
Regardless of the merits, I mean, we'll figure that out as we go and the updates come in. I would seriously consider bringing the top of foundation up to 14 feet.
Noted.
I'm gonna kind of go around the room. Joanne?
Yeah, you know, first of all, I want to say, David, I do appreciate that you're already thinking about what the options are if this isn't working for the commission. I'm just looking at it though, and I'm thinking, maybe you can repeat what you had kind of said before. If it was moving it out of the ACEC, I'm looking. I do see a space, but doesn't that get us closer to the marsh? So I know that's not what's before us right now, but just putting it out there that I think you were open to kind of recognizing this may be a multi-meeting discussion. I want to note that I agree with you, and I would like to try and see if we can make this work. I'm all for allowing property owners to use their land if they can. So I wanted to say I appreciate that. I do see a lot of challenges with this project as well. But I will do it. I will try to keep an open mind about what other options you might bring our way. That's really all I had. But wanted to say I appreciate that you're also acknowledging that this may be a longer discussion than just 1 or 2 meetings.
Thank you, Joanne. And I think one of the things that will occur is that in working with the applicants, we tried to come up with a footprint that they liked. And obviously, hearing your comments, I think it's going to be necessary to come back with a smaller footprint. And these are all things that I respect the ability, your comments and your willingness to work with me, but it helps my job when I can go back to the applicants and start working through these things. I didn't expect to be taking this job on. It's a difficult one, and so that being said, I would just appreciate the opportunity to continue this and hear from the rest of the commissioners.
So I'll call on Mike. Anything you want to say? Questions?
No, I would say that I'm waiting for the next plan. Currently, this is a no. So we'll see what he comes up with.
Okay. Greg, anything else from you?
No, similar to what Mike said. Right now, of course, it would be a no, but I'm open to improvements if they meet the guidelines, the requirements that we have.
Yeah, and I'm going to add that I would expect to see if you're relocating the house that it remain outside of the 0 to 50 buffer zone.
Understood.
Okay, and I will ask now if there are any abutters present who wish to make any comments. Carol, I can't quite read your name on the screen. If you could unmute and identify yourself and give your address, please.
I am at, we are at 227 Dire Prince Road, so we are the only abutters.
If you could state your name, please, for the record.
Carol Zaglio. And I don't know if I can ask this question, but somebody talked about 14 feet for the platform of the house, I think he said. But
Yeah,
I'm
top of the foundation.
I'm sorry?
Top of foundation.
Top of foundation. I'm a little confused because on the plan that Alex gave us, the average grade plane is 9 feet. 9 feet is so far below the AE zone. I'm very concerned about how this is going to work.
So all I can say, Ms. Zaglio, is that we're designing this in compliance with both FEMA regulations and the state building code. Chuck Wagner suggested we give it a little bit more freeboard and raise it up a little higher, which we can do, but I'm kind of bound by, because it's in a flood zone, it doesn't mean it's not buildable. And there are regulations in place that the state has and FEMA has that tells us how to design it, and that's what I've done. I'm not saying that this won't flood, and I'm not saying your house won't flood either. You're right next door. That's a distinct possibility, and all we can do is use best engineering practices to design it in a manner that won't cause adverse impacts to you as a neighbor or the adjacent resource areas.
I appreciate that. We bought our land in 74, we built in 77. At that point, we were in the 500-year floodplain. So FEMA has remapped, and portion of our house would not be buildable now because it's at the 12-foot level. But 9 feet, I read as 9 feet above sea level. 9 feet is quite a bit lower than 12 feet above sea level, which is our property. And that's just confuses me.
Agreed.
Has your house ever flooded?
Never. Not even during Scissor G when there was huge flooding on Dyer Prince Road, and across the street there was flooding into the basement of what was formerly Craig and Bartlett's house. I don't know if no, we have never flooded. Our basement is bone dry.
Right, that's what I thought. That last king tide, that's why I was saying 14 feet. That big king tide that we had about 4 years ago.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Topped out at 13 feet 9 inches. So if you go to 14, then you should stay dry, which is why I was suggesting that.
Oh.
You guys haven't gotten wet yet. That's a good sign. Looking at the town map, I'm not sure exactly the source of these outlines, but the ACEC line that's on the town GIS map only has bends in it about every 300 feet. So I'm not sure whether somebody was just digitizing with a hand digitizer or whether those are actual points from FEMA, but it doesn't seem right. The proper survey of the elevation of the land would answer a lot of questions.
Understood.
Okay, and any other, thank you for sharing your comments with us.
Welcome.
Appreciate that. And just to clarify on the elevation, I believe the current 10th building code is base flood elevation plus 3 feet.
No, actually, Karen, that's for a velocity zone.
Uh-huh.
This is an AE zone, so the first floor is required to be elevated 1 foot above the BFE in an AE zone. What you're quoting is a velocity zone.
Okay, I thought they had changed that, but I guess I have my head in other floodplain regulations being developed, so that's on me. And then
I'll double check, but I feel pretty comfortable with my knowledge on that.
Okay, because they did adopt the 10th one starting in January, and I know some flood things had changed.
Well, I'm going to review that as well. I'm making a note of it right now.
Okay. All right. Are there we've had the only a butter, and I guess we're all clear on that we need to continue. And David, you have some work ahead of you.
You bet.
Okay. Do we want to schedule this?
Are there any other people that want to speak? I see a lot of faces.
That's for a project later on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, if I could, I'd like to continue to the next available meeting, Karen.
I believe that's May 9th. Let me just double check. Yeah, our first meeting in May, is May 13th.
That would be great.
Okay, so
And
if we
I
could
want
have,
to thank everybody for being kind to me this evening.
so if we might have a motion to continue to May 13th.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay, and a second.
Second,
Okay, Joanne,
yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Give me here's my agenda. Okay. We'll come back to see whether we're ready for 150 State Highway. At this point, I don't see Gary on the call.
I'm here.
He's in
I'm in
person.
person.
Oh, you're in person. Okay. Then I guess we'll do that. Okay, we have a continuation of after the fact administrative review filed by 150 Old State Highway Cottages LLC. Applicant proposes to install a fence at property located at 150 State Highway, map 20, parcel 114. And when last we met, we gave you the specifications we require for the fence, and you were going to come back with a plan. And where are we on that?
I've had a conversation with the owner of the fence company who installed the fence, and he come up with a couple ideas, just waiting to put them on paper. And what we're proposing is in the velocity zone, putting the first 3 feet of fence on some sort of a hinge system, similar to the scupper idea that I gave forward, which in fact allows water to come in and out of a boat. So we're using that, or I'm stealing that phrase, to let the water come in and out underneath the fence. The area outside the velocity zone and in a above floodplain, we propose to leave as is, and then the rest to bring 6 inches above as requested by the board last time. So basically looking for the owner of the fence company to put down a plan on paper so that we can submit it to the board. So it'd be asking for a continuance this time until that happens.
Okay, before we do that, let me be very clear on what I thought I heard you say. That you want to put in a hinge system in the velocity zone where we had asked for a slatted fence. And that you were that you would raise it 6 inches in the velocity zone, but otherwise plan to leave it basically touching the ground in the remainder of the fence?
No, you asked for 3 feet.
6
first
feet.
three. No, you asked for the first 3 feet of fencing from the ground up, 3 feet in a velocity zone to have the water pass and repass.
That is not what, actually, I'm going to interrupt you because that's not what we asked for. We told you that the fence within jurisdiction needs to be 6 inches above the ground, whether it's in a velocity zone or not. And that in the velocity zone, we told you we wanted a slatted fence. And we went over it quite some time at the last meeting.
Well, I've had issue with Alex not wanting to pursue this more often than I chose to. And, you know, if you want a slotted fence, then you're going to get a slotted fence. But I told you at the last meeting that I wanted to see if that fence could be moved with the water flow. The idea is to hold the water back, to allow the water to flow. Then I thought I had a choice. It wasn't on my understanding that was a mandate. So if I misunderstood that, that's fine. But, you know, if I asked the agent to do something and he said, he tells, like you saying, I told you over and over again, then I don't know what to say about that.
And I know.
I've agreed to raise the fence 6 inches as you requested in the area that's outside the velocity zone.
Right. So we need 6 inches all along the fence.
Yeah, I'm not going to raise the fence 6 inches in an area that's not in a floodplain.
Well, then here's the options, and I'm going to get you in. I'll let you jump in for a minute, Hillary, but then I'm going to get back to myself.
Sure. I just want to add that it's customary for us to review a plan, not design a project. And so I think the difficulty here is that We don't have a plan in front of us for the commission to consider, and we did not have a plan in front of us for the commission to consider. And perhaps Alex was being careful of that fine line that we have to walk about designing plans versus reviewing applications before us. And I think the commission was clear in what they wanted, and I think it probably is documented in the meeting minutes what they were requesting.
Well, let me just say this. I suffer from bipolar, and bipolar is protected class under the American Disabilities Act. So if I ask for patience in trying to ascertain exactly what you want, and I don't get it from your agent in writing, then that's on you, not me. So I'll give you anything you want within reason, and if it's applicable. What I've said is that I have a fence company who's waiting to put something on plan as you asked for. And Cape Cod, as you know, it's not easy sometimes to get people to do things in a timely manner. So we're trying to fulfill your requirements by telling you that this man who's a fence expert is going to put something down on paper that he can do that will present to your board.
Okay, and we've been quite clear on our requirements.
I want to see
So
them in
we
writing, that's
expect-
all. This is not a non-issue. It really is. I mean, we're going to give you everything you want, but I want to see it on paper. And if your agent won't give it to me, I don't know what, my hands are tied.
Well, I guess you will submit a plan that we can review, at which time we will discuss it. And then the commission will either vote to approve your plan, ask you to change your plan, or vote to deny the plan and then issue an order for you to remove the fence.
Exactly. That's exactly what I've asked you to do, is to wait for the plan in writing.
And we have asked you for a plan in writing that was supposed to be submitted for this meeting. We generally don't continue administrative reviews this long, particularly enforcement issues. But I will ask the rest of the commission if they're comfortable with this, or we could just issue a denial.
May I speak briefly?
Yes.
Sorry, if you recall from the last hearing that we had, it was my request. Gary the applicant had originally asked for a May hearing on this, and the board had discussed pushing it to May. You can blame me for wanting to push it up and thinking that we could get a plan in this early and hopefully having the hearings at the same time to save for the town to put them all at the same time period, knowing that we had the septic hearing coming on today. So that's on me. I asked to push it up because I thought we could get a plan in. I don't blame it on the applicant. The board, the original time that we went through this and agreed to put forth the plan was for the May hearing, which I think is appropriate now. But that was the reason that it's on for today is simply for that reason. So I'd ask for the continuance to be granted.
Okay, and I'm just noting that this is an after the fact filing, but it's also an enforcement issue for us. So, okay, Joanne?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say it might be helpful for the applicant or not, just putting out there, to separate kind of as you're describing, Karen, that this is an after the fact review, and then also he's suggesting submitting a new plan, right? So maybe we should divorce these two issues and say that that fence needs to come out as an enforcement action. And then we look forward to receiving the plan about what the new fence is going to look like. So it might be just logically, it might be more helpful to think of this as two separate things so that we like kind of wipe the slate clean. Like fence comes out, we look at plan for new fence. Everybody kind of is able to pull these two issues apart. So just putting that on the table is something to consider.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission want to weigh in on that? Hillary?
I just had one more comment. I think that Gary can review the meeting minutes and see what the commission had requested or watch the video because it's quite clear in that. So I don't think he needs direct correspondence from Alex on that because that's Alex could get it wrong in translating it. So I think that that is available for anyone to watch and take notes upon. The second piece I am concerned about is that no more work should go on until there is an approved plan. And so there was some back and forth correspondence where it seemed like the plan was going to be to make these changes and then come back and seek approval for a certificate of compliance. So I just want to be sure that the process is understood either by Anthony or by Gary, because it's that lack of understanding or misunderstanding, I think, that causes more problems down the line. So the process is you have an approved plan and then you receive a piece of paper that says, go ahead and do the work. You don't do the work and then come and seek out a certificate of compliance or show us how it's going to be. And we as agents or Alex as the agent does not have the authority to approve of anything without the commission.
Hillary, I can't be any more clear that we're waiting for a plan from the fence installer to give you exactly what you're asking for.
Yeah, so nothing will take place before then. That's why I think a brief continuance makes sense. We'll push upon the fence installer to get us that so you can approve it at the next hearing, and if approved, then we go and make those changes as requested. And I don't think it's to back up to the prior comment. Sorry to jump in on here. I don't think it's remove the entire structure and then put down an entire new structure. It's a change in it. So that's why we're not going to touch the fence until you approve it. But a brief continuance will allow us to present what we intend to do. And you can say, yes, that's exactly what we are looking for. Thank you so much. Or actually, that's 90% of the way there. Could you do this too? And we say, yes, that's fine.
Okay, and I also do want to note that aside from looking at the rewatching the hearing, that Mr. Vecchione is also represented by counsel, and therefore I feel like his interests are well represented in this meeting. So between the applicant and his counsel, they should be able to rewatch the hearing, take notes at the hearing, and determine exactly what the commission is requiring for this fence.
Yes, understood what you're asking for.
Okay. So if the commission, somebody might like to make a motion to continue this to the May 13th meeting, at which time we will expect a properly constructed fence proposal.
Thank you.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Greg?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Mike? Joanne?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay.
Thank you, board. Thank you, commission.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. And now we're going to the notice of intent filed by Gary Vecchione. Applicant proposes to install a new subsurface sewage disposal system, a new water service installation, and electrical lines at property located at 150 State Highway, map 20, parcel 114.
Okay, good evening. For the record, I'm Laura Schofield from Schofield Brothers, representing 150 Old State Highway Cottages. And the property at 150 State Highway is a cottage colony. There are 7 cottages here that have been there for quite a while, in some cases more than 90 years. This is a 2.69 acre property. It's been long developed. It overlooks Town Cove. And the property also fronts on Route 6, just north of the Rotary. And so the project is the upgrade of the existing cesspools that currently serve the cottages. The property recently sold, and as a result of the sale, a new septic system is required. And so in terms of resource areas, Town Cove has some salt marsh associated with it. The most landward resource areas affecting our project are land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is a VE zone along the shoreline of Town Cove. And there's also a little A zone in the very southeasterly corner of the lot. And in some cases, behind the cottages, there's also a coastal bank. We submitted our bank profiles with our notice of intent. And behind cottages 1 and 2, land subject to coastal storm flowage and the top of the bank are pretty much one and the same. And behind cottages 3 and 4, the landform is steeper. So the top of the bank parts company from the floodplain there. And then as you get past cottage number 4, the coastal bank ends as the slope becomes more gradual, and then we just go back to the floodplain. So the coastal bank here is an elevated landform that protects the upland portions of the site from storm damage and flooding. The Wetlands Protection Act buffer zone and the Eastham buffer zone overlap pretty much most all of the upland areas here. There are 7 cottages here with 20 bedrooms. So our design calls for an innovative alternative technology as required by the local regulations, because this is an environmentally sensitive area. And all of the tanks and piping and pump chambers that you see are required by Title V. And there is quite a difference between today's code and the cesspools of yore on Cape Cod. So yeah, so it's quite a change from the old cesspools. So the septic system was laid out so that the soil absorption system will be on the highest point of the property. That's also the farthest from Town Cove and the salt marsh. And then the rest of the system is providing a septic tank and a pump to all of the cottages so that we can collect all of the wastewater into our treatment tanks. And so near our leaching area, we have a 1,500 gallon septic tank for cottages 3 and 4. We have a pre-anoxic tank and a recirculation tank, as well as 4 Advantex filter pods. And then that's followed by a pump chamber so that we can provide pressure dosing to our leaching area. And the system will reduce BOD and TSS, and which basically means it'll just clear up the strength of the wastewater well beyond that a regular Title V system would do. And we're also reducing nitrogen in the wastewater. And so the area between
unrelated thing hiccups.
I call them.
Hey, Hillary, could you mute?
Oops, there we go. So the cottages front on an existing driveway, and most all of the work for the septic system will be going on within the driveway area and some existing grass area. And while that area is going to be disrupted to install the new septic system, we also will be updating the electric conduits that serve the cottages and also the water lines. So as long as that area is going to be disrupted, we're going to install new lines for those utilities as well. And in terms of doing the work in the buffer zone, we have a work limit called for in between the side of the cottages that front on Town Cove. So that'll be installed prior to any of the work being done. Once everything is installed, the existing grade will go back the way that it is now. The leaching area will have a little bit of a bump to it now, but not much of one. Everything's just going to be tucked back in the way it is now. It'll be loamed and seeded with a rye fescue conservation mix. There are 2 cedar trees that are coming out for the installation of all the treatment tanks, and we've called for those to be replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio in a location to be chosen by the property owner. We don't want those trees going too close to our new septic system. And all of the existing cesspools will be either removed if they're within the floodplain and filled in, or just plain old filled in. And I think that's it, except for the fact that we didn't get our DEP file number either. And I will not be in the state on May 13th. So I'm hoping that if the commission has any questions or concerns at all with this project, that I can answer them for you now, and perhaps once, hopefully we'll have that DEP number by the following meeting, and that can just be a formality of opening it and closing. And I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I also am hoping that everybody on the commission will ask all their questions today. So it looks like a pretty thorough plan, which is usual for you, Laura, and I thank you for that. It's come to my attention, Alex mentioned that this plan doesn't exactly match the plan approved by the Board of Health, that there are some water lines or such that are not on the Board of Health plan that are on this plan.
Yes, because, and I made reference on our plan, you'll see there's a note that says to refer to the plan that was approved by the Board of Health for all the details with respect to this plan. And during that permitting, well, Hillary is on board here, so she'll remember this, but the water lines that were in the ground for the cottage colony have to be replaced as part of the septic system plan, because you can't sleeve them when they're already in the ground. And so in order to know where the new lines were going, a contractor had to be on board. And so that's why now we can show the new water lines, which essentially are going pretty much where the old ones were. But that's the difference between their plan and this plan. But the layout of the septic system, which is what the Board of Health approved, is the same.
Okay, and I'm sure Hillary will weigh in on that in a little bit. I have a question about the cedar trees as well. Is it possible to, as you have heavy equipment on the site, to scoop out the cedar trees with the root balls and relocate them instead of planting new trees? And are the trees healthy enough to do that?
Laura, I'll answer that.
Okay.
Is that okay, Madam Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
So I belong to a Facebook group called Cape Cod Tradespeople and Tradesmen. There's I think about either 10 or 20,000 tradesmen all over Cape Cod. And I put in a request to have, it's not a root ball scenario, more so than a tree spade. Truck operated tree spade that comes in and actually pulls the roots up and replants it. But unfortunately, under those, inside that group of 20,000 people, I didn't have one response. So I don't know that there's one of those trucks on the entire Cape Cod, other than one that's local. But I didn't have any luck from that person as well. So we tried to do that. I'd love to do that. I'm still willing to pursue that. But as of today, I don't have someone who's willing to do it. My understanding is that this hearing is primarily to, again, it's just my understanding that we're trying to draw a line of limit of work. So if we could come out with an idea of whether you approve that limit of work and then give me some leeway once the plan gets implemented, I'd be happy to move that cedar growth. But unfortunately, it's not just one tree. I forget what they call it, but it's where two trees come to one root. So I'm not sure of the likelihood of success on that. And they're very broad. So I'm not sure the success of it, but I'm willing to spend, $5,000 to move that tree. And I've
It-
tried and would continue to try.
Okay, so it sounds like that's not immediately feasible. And then just looking at the mitigation, we're usually requiring 2-to-1, and you're proposing 1-to-1 for the trees.
Well,
Yeah,
if we can save the tree, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll step aside after this. But if we're saving the tree, it would be 1-to-1. If we remove the tree, we're happy to go 2-to-1.
If you could move the tree and there would be a 3-year survivability requirement. And if it did not survive, it would require additional mitigation. But otherwise, we require 2-to-1 mitigation. And Laura, if you want to speak on that.
yeah, the reason I did 1-to-1 is because this huge plan with all the treatment is mitigation in and of itself for Town Cove. This plan will protect the interests of 6 out of the 8 interests protected in the Wetlands Protection Act. So that's why I replaced them on a 1-to-1 basis, because essentially just because this whole entire plan is a significant amount of mitigation, and it will be a significant, huge benefit to the health of Town Cove.
Laura, could I ask, or the chairman, is a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1, do you have to match calipers, or what size tree has to get replanted?
Well, part of the reason for 2-to-1 is that usually something large is getting removed and it never replaced with something comparable.
Right.
In
So
size.
if it's just a matter of planting 2-seater trees instead of 1, we're happy to do that. But I still want to try to find a tree spade and move that setup. But my question is, if we take out a 10-inch caliper cedar tree, we can't replace it with 10-inch caliper. They don't exist. So what's your requirements? I'm just looking to be educated on this subject.
On the plan, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, on the plan, we've called for the trees to be replaced with a 4 to 6 foot tall cedar tree. And that's minimum. If, I mean, I usually like to say if the homeowner wants to plant more native species, that I don't think we should limit them in that.
Well, it seems to me that's an easy fix, and I just want to mention something just came to mind. There is a fairly large rock entangled in that root system, so I'm not sure a tree spade will work. But again, I'd like to give that my best college try, and then if that fails, we'll replace 3-to-1. We don't have a problem with that. We love to have trees and what's the word between us and the highway? I'm trying to think of the word, like a landscaping buffer, natural buffer. So we're happy to do that.
Okay. That's it for my question. Hillary, do you want to just weigh in on the difference between the plan we have and the Board of Health plan?
Yep, the difference would be that the water lines are shown on this plan, and the other addition is showing water to the garage, which was not contemplated on the Board of Health plan. So that's not approved by the Board of Health.
So it would have to go back, if we approve this, it would have to go back to the Board of Health for additional approval, or is that correct?
Well, it would be a different plan, so he would only have one approval, or they just could remove the water to the garage, and then the plan would be the same.
Well, the water line's pre-existing, and one point that Laura didn't make was the water line that's being replaced is at a 3-foot depth, which was atypical for seasonal cottage colonies. We're going to a 4-foot minimum depth, which under Cape Cod guidelines provide for more than a modicum of protection of frost and freeze. So predominantly, we're going inside the same lines as the existing water line. Again, I was hoping that we'd focus on the limit of work, and inside that limit, as long as we're protecting the resource area, that would be given some latitude on site or field tolerance, if you will.
And there was water in that garage before, because there was a washing machine in there that came out as part of the septic system design.
Yeah, I'm just thinking Sorry.
I was gonna say, I understand all that, but the plan to the Board of Health specifically said that water was to be abandoned to the garage. So there's no disposal line coming out of the garage for water, and it specifically said water was to be abandoned.
Sure, we'll abandon it then. Thank you.
So we would need that noted on this plan as well. And just for Gary, that conditions for a project from us requires that all other required permits are in place before any work begins. So you can't just say we only want to be concerned about this, because we're also concerned that all the other permits are in
Which
place
permits is
before any
that?
work begins. And
Which permits is that? Which
the
permits
Board of
are you
Health.
talking about?
That would be Board of Health building whatever else is required for a particular project. And
I'll
you're
let Ann
abandoning
see
it. You're abandoning it, so it no longer is an issue. But that has to be updated on the plan that we would be approving
Sure,
here.
I'm sure we can accommodate the board in that. Thank you.
And your comment that you were only concerned about the limit of work, we're concerned with the whole plan here. The commission is allowed and entitled to ask whatever questions on the project that we deem necessary within our jurisdiction. So you might want us only to be concerned with the things you want us to be concerned with, but we are concerned with the entire project. And that being said, Laura, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm not trying to, go on and on about it, but the note on the plan was that the plumbing in the garage would be abandoned, not the water line, because you could still have a hose out there in your garage, but the intent was to abandon the plumbing that was out there.
Which is essentially an unpermitted use, so we're happy to do that.
Okay. So we do need
But
that update.
We can work with the health department on that.
Okay, and we need a plan that reflects what is being permitted and what is not going to be included in the work. And since we're going to have to continue anyway, that shouldn't be a huge issue. I'm going to ask if anybody else on the commission has questions, comments. I see nobody. Okay. So we do have to continue this. I should ask if there are any abutters who wish to make any comments or ask questions on this plan. Now is the time to speak up. Okay. So I think it's pretty clear. We're mostly just waiting on the DEP number and a little adjustment on the plan to reflect our conversation today. That includes mitigation and so on. So we can continue. I'm going to ask the commission for a motion to continue to May 13th. And I assume that the applicant and probably his attorney will be at that meeting to represent?
Yes.
Okay. So if we might have a motion to continue to May 13th?
Before you go to a vote, can I just ask one last question?
Go ahead.
On the site visit today, how did that go? Were there any questions or thoughts or comments?
Well, that would have been brought up when I asked the commission if they had any additional comments.
Well,
So
I wasn't able to attend, so I'm just curious.
Yes. Greg, you were there. You want to answer
Sure.
that?
There were only two comments that we had, and those were the cesspools being removed and mitigation for the trees. And Laura took care of that in her presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, we didn't. I have one more question before we do that. So the thank you for reminding me, the cesspools. So the ones in the VE zone, are those getting removed entirely and then filled, and the other ones just filled?
Yes, If it's in the velocity zone, it'll be removed and filled in. If it's somewhere where it's out of the way and not in the velocity zone, we'll just pump it and fill it in.
Okay. Okay. And I think, let me add one last call for questions, comments. Okay. If we can have a motion to approve, to continue to May 13th, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay. Chuck,
yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Mike? I couldn't hear you, Mike.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. Okay,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
See you in a
you.
couple weeks.
Okay. All right. Now we have a continuation of notice of intent filed by Bernard and Diane Durante. Applicant proposes a pier, ramp, and float for private boating access at 255 Mary Chase Road, map 18, parcel 80A. And before I ask the applicants to speak, I'm just going to run through the procedure because I know we have a lot of people on this in this meeting who have interest and might wish to make comments or ask questions who are abutters. So the way this proceeds is that the applicant will present their project. The commission members will and staff will then ask whatever questions, make whatever comments, and have a dialogue with the applicants. When we seem to have exhausted those questions, I will then open it up for abutter comments, and I will limit that to 3 minutes each and ask that you stay within the jurisdiction of the commission, which is wetland related issues. And with that, I'm going to ask Mark if you would identify yourself and get us started, please.
Thank you very much. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Yes, for the record, Mark Burgess with Shorefront Consulting, representing Mr. Durante. He is trying to log on. I'm not sure if he's been successful or not. But at any rate, my understanding is that we're going to have to continue this anyway because of the shellfish warden hasn't had a chance to get out there. But
yes, that's going to be, I believe, April 28th or 29th for the shellfish survey.
Yeah, so we'll be the May 13th. Anyway, but yes, my goal is the same as before, would be to let's go through the project and see if there's nothing else left except for the shellfish warden, and that makes the next meeting that much easier. So May 13. Okay, so yeah, this is a new dock on the site. If you've been out there, you know, it's a large expanse of lawn sloping down to where the dock site is. The dock is sited more than 25 feet from the property line. There's an existing well-vegetated no-mow zone, vegetated buffer between the lawn and the top of the bank. And then you get out into some mixed vegetation and then salt marsh, and then you're out into Town Cove. So we looked at several options and designs, and the applicant liked the design that we just did for a rebuild it on Cedar Lane, I believe, a couple of months ago, well, 6 months ago maybe. So we've decided to go with prefabricated aluminum sections. These are 30 feet long. This is an exact replica of the other dock that was just reconstructed on Cedar Lane. So 30-foot prefabricated sections, so they rest on the two pilings. So right away, you're eliminating half of the pilings of a normal dock that would be 15 or 16-foot spans. We're going to start up at the slope, at landward of the top of the bank. There's an access ramp from the lawn going up to the dock. The docks, the first section is 6 feet over the marsh in vertical clearance to the underlying structural member. We go out 30 feet for the first section, and then the next two sections are ramped down. And this is so that the dock isn't quite so high out at the water, because that just makes the ramp really steep at low tide. We still have 8 foot of clearance by the 8.5 feet of clearance underneath by the time we're over the end of the marsh, so plenty of clearance over the marsh. And then we get out the last 20 foot section. There's a storage bench out there. And I have a 3 by 20 foot aluminum ramp leading to a 10 by 24 foot float, which is secured by 2 permanent pilings. Now the pilings for the dock itself are proposed to be fiberglass. These are completely inert. They're used quite often. In looking at inert materials, we usually only have a choice of Greenheart or fiberglass. So the fiberglass piles are nice because they drive easy. They're lighter weight, but they're very strong and rigid. They drive easy, so you don't need huge equipment to try to drive them. However, if you use them for a float anchoring system, they wear fairly quickly with the movement of the float. So you'll notice that we have Greenheart pilings proposed at the end for the float, and that's very typical for dock installation. So Greenheart, you're well aware, that's a mahogany kind of very hardwood that doesn't rot. Let's see, I'm going to go through my notes now. We did receive comment, well, we got a file number, and there was nothing out of the ordinary comments from DEP. They just said that a Chapter 91 license is required, which of course absolutely is. So nothing out of the ordinary there. We received Division Marine Fisheries comments, and they also had nothing out of the ordinary, at least for projects like mine that I'm aware of. They talked about the habitat, winter flounder, and a time of year restriction and such, which is very standard. But their comments were basically related to concerns about impact to fisheries. And then they just went on with the other standard ones. It recommends that all staging and storage of construction equipment be located upland of the project site, of course, and activities requiring a barge. You don't want to ground the barge, and then contamination of containment, of fuel spills. So none of the comments from DMF, at least in my projects, are out of the ordinary as well. That I'm not really sure I really can add too much more to it. Then if you've seen the installation at Cedar Drive, this is going to look very, very much like it. It's simple. It'll be maintenance free. These dock sections, I included some pictures of the Cedar Street
Lane. Cedar Lane, 20 Cedar Lane.
Yes, thank you. And they have the through flow grading over the entire dock, and that's what will be done here as well. It's pretty much that simple. So I'll attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Actually, I think I'll ask the people who are out for the site visit if they want to go first. Mike, you and Greg were out there. Is that correct? Mike, I can't hear you.
I was not there today.
Oh, okay. So, Greg, were you the only one out with a site visit with Alex this morning?
Yes. I mean, one of the questions is there any way to shorten it? I know that's probably the question you probably expected, but is there anything that can be done to shorten and still be, use it for what you need?
I'm gonna say relatively no, because we want 3 feet of water depth at low tide around the float.
Yeah.
So that and I have the landward side right at 3 feet. So it's positioned as close as I can to the edge of that drop off. And if I go narrower than that, you might look at float stops, but you're splitting hairs. You might make it 3 or 4 feet landward, and then you've got the difficulty of float stops. So practically speaking, no. This looks, now this is probably within, it's almost exactly, it's actually, I think it's shorter than the dock at Cedar Lane. I think that was 120 feet and this is 110. It looks like a long distance, but you have to get from point A to point B, and there's a fair expanse of salt marsh, but I don't see this impacting the marsh at all. It's gonna be way above any of that, but, no, if I'll impinge on the 3-foot depth if I go landward.
Gotcha. How about the float size? Is there any way to reduce that?
There's always a way to reduce it, to a certain point. I asked the applicant what size they wanted. We went through different sizes. I have a 10 by 24. So that's 240 square feet. You could certainly go 8 by 24, and that would bring the outer edge in by 2 feet. You'd leave the landward edge in. He wanted the 10 feet for stability. So the narrower the float gets, the more tippy it can get. And I can tell you that being out there in a kayak in the wind, trying to put a PVC pipe out there is not fun. So I think he's worried about wind and waves in that part of the cove, moving the float around a lot.
And will kayaks be able to get through there easily? Because I know that was a concern of the
Through where?
Underneath the pier.
You mean like if they wanted to travel landward of the edge of the float?
Right.
I don't see why not. There's the water. That's a 20-foot ramp. 18 feet of it is over the water, so they've got 18 feet to deal with. And every bit they get closer to land, even at low tide, there's lots of clearance overhead.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Karen, that's all I have right now.
Thank you. Oh, Bernie, sorry, Bernie, the owner was able to log in. He's on the line here.
Okay, I'm gonna go to me and let me say welcome to the owner. Looking at the float to start with and working backwards from there, you want 10 feet for stability for width, but that doesn't mean the length has to be 24 feet. What about, I'd like to see it smaller, maybe 200 square feet total. That would still give you the stability, but I'd like to see something smaller, and I think Greg expressed that as well.
Yeah, I would propose to the applicant if an 8 foot by, if you wanted 200 square feet, you could go 8 by 25, and that would be 200. In this particular area, I wouldn't want to go narrower than 8 feet, but I would ask Mr. Durante if an 8 by 24 and 8 by 25 is acceptable to him.
How about a 10 by 20? That gives you your original width, but shortens the length.
Yeah.
Well, 10 by 20 would be better, I think, than 8 by, if it makes that big a difference to you. The more, I imagine we'd have a lot of little kids out there, so the bigger the float, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But if you have for some reason, if you have objections to a few more feet, and that's something we can't get around, then I'd rather keep the width than the length for stability, I would think.
Okay, we're looking to minimize the size as much as possible of a dock because of its environmental impact on the resource area. And so what is the minimum? You are planning to keep a boat out here? The dock is for a boat?
That's correct.
Okay, so what is the minimum size of the float you need to support the boat?
Well, I don't think the float size is really the issue. It's just the wave action on the float, people trying to get in and out of it. That's my real concern. I don't know why there's a increased environmental consideration for a few more feet of float when there would be an increased safety issue for all the boats that pass by there. So I'm really reluctant to reduce the size at all, but everything's a compromise. And so I'm just not hearing a good reason to do it unless you absolutely, these things don't happen in a vacuum. I understand that.
Yeah, but we generally want to permit the smallest dock and float that will meet requirements. And your engineer, Mark, said that you're looking at 10 feet for stability. At 10 by 20, you've got that 10 feet for stability, and 20 feet seems like a reasonable size of a float. And that's what we, I believe, have permitted on other docks in the area.
Yeah, without having a square foot limit in your regulations, I can tell you that I've done both in Dennis where I'm at. I've done eight, I've even done 10 by 24, but 8 by 24 is common and 10 by 20 is probably the most common size float. So really it's up to, if Bernie wants to reduce it, I would only suggest those two dimensions, because with the 8 foot narrower width with the length, you get a little more stability as well. So I would say 8 by 24 or 8 by 25 for 200, or 10 by 20 for 200. The 10-foot width, Bernie, will give you more side-to-side stability.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're after, since the wave action is from front to back.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, so that's certainly something we would potentially go along with.
Hillary, I'll let you jump in, and after you're done, I'll continue.
Okay.
I wasn't actually going to talk about the size of the float. So if you have more float discussion.
I don't have more float discussion. I have other discussion.
Okay.
But if you want to jump
Sure.
in, I'll be happy to take a pause.
I wanted to go back to the discussion of kayaks, because when we were out at the site doing a site visit, it seems like that is a heavy kayak use area. And I want to understand better what this ramp and float will do, and what that looks like for kayaking, because I think that is a widely used area. You can see where all the kayaks are stashed and stored, and I think we've heard that from a number of abutters. So I want to understand what that looks like at all stages of the tide.
Okay, if you look at I drew the dock, the ramp, and the float at low tide. So as you go up, then the ramp actually gets higher above the, the float stays the same, obviously, yes. So my question is, if you've got this whole expanse of the channel and everything else, why do people want to purposely kayak landward of this float? Why wouldn't they just go around it? But having said that, as I said before, let me scale on the plan. At low tide, there is 3 feet to the closest part of the ramp by the float, and 8 feet by the dock, if they were going to go, right up against the dock piles. So unless they're reaching their paddle over their head, I mean, I do a lot of kayaking. There's no part of my body that's 3 feet above the water. So if somebody chose that they wanted to kayak underneath this ramp instead of going out and around, I believe there's plenty of room for anybody to do that.
Hillary?
That's fine. I think, when I think of boating, I think of my kids as well, and I wouldn't want them going out and around. I want them hugging the shore. So, I asked that partially for that reason.
I understand.
So to follow up on that, you're saying that they have a 3-foot clearance at high tide.
I'd have to look at that, but
Or you've been talking low tide, but access is you're supposed to allow public access at all tides, I would think.
well, public access, that's for Chapter 91, and that's only for the purposes of fishing, fouling, and strolling.
And navigation.
Yeah. There's 3 feet. There's 3 feet between the bottom of the dock and mean high water. So you always have 3 feet to go underneath this thing.
It's probably minimally okay for a kayak paddle. And it is our concern because our bylaw does charge us with protecting recreation in wetland areas in addition to other resources.
I understand.
Okay. Okay. And going backwards a little bit, I do actually have one more concern about floats, but it has nothing to do with size. We have been permitting floats with float stops to ensure that they maintain that distance between the bottom of the float and the substrate. So I would like to see that here as well.
But you don't need them if you have 3 feet of clearance. You don't need them. We have 3 feet of clearance at low tide. So the small dock and pier guideline book, they ask, or what they, in the guideline book anyway, they say that they want 18 inches of clearance around the entire float, and only if the area is significant to shellfish, they want 30 inches. So we have 3 feet around all sides of the float. So I don't see a reason for float stops here.
And we haven't covered the shellfish issue, which we're not going to do until I would believe our next meeting, once the shellfish constable has completed the survey. So so let's put that on hold then.
Well, did everybody get a chance to review the shellfish survey that we did for the site?
I believe so, but I think we should wait and discuss. I want to wait and discuss that until I see what our local study from our shellfish department says, rather than repeating a conversation again once we have that additional information.
Okay. What other questions might you have?
Well, I'm concerned about the distance over salt marsh. And then I also have questions because it seems like it's what, 55 feet over salt marsh?
Yep.
That seems like quite a lot. And that also comes to talking about the decking and how much light actually penetrates through that gridded aluminum decking.
Okay. So the decking that's on the one at Cedar Lane is the through flow grading, which is a 65% transmissibility through it. You guys should be well familiar with that grading. It's been around for many years. Now, in addition, Division of Marine Fisheries didn't comment on the height, and they usually do. And what they want, so the small dock and pier guideline back in 2003 suggested a 1-to-1 ratio of width to height over salt marsh. So for a 4-foot dock, they wanted 4 feet high to the underlying structural member. Some years passed and we had grading for lower docks, and that was okay. And then DMF said, nah, we don't really want to consider grading anymore. We want 1.5 to 1. Now, if I do a dock, they want 1.5 to 1. So for a 4-foot wide dock, they want 6 feet above the marsh. That is the minimum that you have here. And it goes from 6 feet and increases to 8 and 8.5. So between the distance to salt marsh that DMF did not comment on this time because I met their suggestion, and the grading, there should be no reason to think that there's any shading impacts from a dock of this height with the grading over this marsh.
%. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Okay, and then talk about how you're installing the pilings into the salt marsh, because I am not clear on that.
Right.
That you're spreading. I don't understand the spreading thing. And when I went to try to look it up and figure out what the impacts of that were, I found nothing.
Okay, well that's kind of something new. If you normally, if none of us said anything, the contractor would go out there with, I don't think they can reach it with a crane. They'd probably go out there with a tripod mounted hammer. And initially they would auger into the marsh to get the hard stuff out of the way and to set the pile in the exactly right location. And then they would hammer it the rest of the way. That would be if you and I never said anything, that's probably the way it would go. And it depends on what contractor and what toys and equipment they have to put them in. But I don't think you can get a crane here. Now, how familiar are you guys with Anchor Marine? Pretty
They
much?
do a lot of work. They do a lot of work we've permitted.
Okay, so he did an elevated walkway for me once in Chatham. And he used, he has two different methods. I'm not saying that he's the contractor of choice here, but he certainly could be. But he has two methods that he uses that are brilliant. One, on a regular ongoing dock or walkway, he's put the crane on the walkway and then built the next section from the crane, moved the crane, and then leapfrogged out. I don't know that he can't do that here because he has to lift these sections into place. However, he has all the elevated walkway that he did for me in Chatham. He actually used like marsh mats and backed what looks like a boat trailer out there that had his pile driver. And he backed it out to the end of the marsh, started driving piles there, and then gradually winched it over the marsh. And as each pile was driven, he moved it over, and then he removed everything from the marsh as soon as the piles were in. And I swear to God, 1 month later, you would never know he was there. It was amazing. So there are ways to do this.
Let me just ask, because I'm curious about this.
Sure.
As you install the dock, the walkway that was installed would be sufficiently stable to support the weight of a crane?
Well, I don't know that. So the contractor has to make that call. But I know you can look on Anchor's website, I believe, and he has the picture of this contraption on what would be the deck of an elevated walkway.
Mm-hmm.
And he would park it on the section that was built and then use that to support the beams for the next section, build the decking, and then drive the crane over and keep going out. And then of course back up to get back in. Very ingenious.
Well, that obviously would be mitigate the impact quite a bit. But let me ask you about spreading the salt marsh apart. That's the part that I have to say confused me.
So the plan there is you would you push a hole into the marsh and literally push it aside or squish. That's not a technical term, but I mean you would squish it open to where you're not displacing any marsh at all, and then push the piling down through and hammer it in and walk away. So that that might be splitting hairs, okay? But because normally you would either auger. These are only 8-inch pilings too. Remember, they're only this big.
Mm-hmm.
So normally you would just auger them, push them down through to get them started, and hammer them the rest of the way. But you could perhaps smush the marsh away from itself so it forms a hole, and then push the piling down in between. But no pun intended, you're splitting hairs.
Spartina grasses, maybe.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That sort of makes sense to me. Okay.
Thank you.
So then, looking at the gangway here, you provided some pictures from the Cedar Lane project, and it appears that the landward end of the gangway is resting directly on the ground. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think where it lands at this point would be right at the edge of what is now the lawn of the vegetative buffer.
Okay.
I put a stake out there. There's a rock and a stake that says start of the platform, and it's right at the edge of the vegetative buffer.
Okay, so at the moment I'm not able to get out for site visits.
Understand. Did Mr. Douglas see that?
But that isn't the question, really.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we usually don't permit ramps and walkways and things to be directly on the ground. And I am surprised that we might have overlooked that on the previous project.
I can certainly rest it on a block if you need to, and then it's a step up to get to it. That's easy.
Yeah, that like that. And then let's talk about your access, your work access along the path landward of the dock. So looking at that, and I admit it's mostly satellite imagery and such, but appears to be some vegetation in that pathway down to the dock. The work that you're doing, will it disturb vegetation? Will you need to remove anything to bring materials down, or what's the plan there?
As far as my intent to draw the access was over, everything was over lawn. It was all lawn over there.
Okay, because it appears, and I wasn't on site, so it could be wrong, and maybe Greg can check me on this also. It appeared, looking at the Google satellite images, that there are some trees and shrubs in that area, and
Yeah,
I just want to make sure.
Right. There's two ways you could get there. That's the shortest route, because up by the driveway, there's a place to back in. There's a circular driveway, well, sort of circular, that goes to the front of the house, but then on the east side, directly from the street, you can back in about 20 feet. It's a nice wide gravel area. It is all lawn from there to the dock. Google Earth might show you shadows of trees, unfortunately. And sometimes in Google Earth Pro, there's a little bar at the bottom left-hand side. It says 1995. You can click on that and you can go back in time at various areas. And if you catch one in the wintertime, then it opens up the site.
Right. I have looked at the historical Google imagery.
Yep.
Well aware of the tools and to account for shadows as well by doing that. So I just wanted to make sure that no vegetation was going to be disturbed within the buffer zone and limit of work.
No, madam.
That isn't accounted for. Okay.
Correct. It's all lawn from the gravel driveway right down to where the dock would start.
Okay. Give me a second while I make sure I've covered all my notes here for the moment. I think that's basically it for now. Or wait, give me one more second. Sorry, it's been kind of a long night for me here.
I know. I've been doing other things while I've been listening.
Yeah. Okay. And I have marked up your plan. It's just okay. Percent of light. Okay. I think I've covered all of it. Let me see if anybody else on the commission has additional questions.
Thank you.
And thank you for discussing it in so much detail with me. Joanne, any questions?
No, you covered everything, Karen. Thank you.
Okay, Mike?
I'm waiting for the shellfish report, and Greg, I'd like to see it smaller, if possible. That's it.
You'd like to see what? I'm sorry, you turned away from the mic. We can't hear you when you do that.
If it could be made smaller, I would prefer that, but I'm really waiting for the shellfish report.
Okay. And Greg, anything else for you?
No, I'm all set for now. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up for a butter questions. If you could please raise your hand if you would like to ask questions or make comments, and I will try to call on you in the order in which you do. And after that, I will go back and refer to some of the letters that we've received. Okay. It says I Sorkin. Is that? Go ahead and unmute and identify yourself, please, for the record.
All right, it's actually L. Sorkin. I'm Linda Sorkin. I live next door, 275 Mary Chase Road. And I have 3 comments. The first 2 refer to boating. One is that all of the neighbors are very concerned that this large pier and dock might limit the number of mooring spots that the harbor master will grant. And I know that it isn't, that's not your purview. You don't grant them, but we're very concerned that for those of us who don't have moorings at the moment, but contemplate having them in the near future, that we may not be able to get them. The second pertains to kayaking. It never occurred to me that I could kayak under the dock. I had thought that I would go around it, but when you're approaching, one thing I didn't see on all of the paperwork was a distance between the kayak launch site, because there's only one site that's really appropriate where we aren't destroying the marsh grass. So I don't know the distance between the kayak launch site that the whole community uses and the dock. And I'd want, and when one approaches the launch site, when you're coming back home, there are a lot of boats, you're going through a lot of moorings, and sometimes it can be quite tight. And there was a lot of comment about all the winds and the currents and when there's waves. Yeah, I'd be afraid that when I'm coming back and I'm tired, if there's a strong current, you know, I worry about being pushed against one of the dock supports, and just the ease at which I can come back and forth. And yeah, I know Bernie is going to have a lot of grandchildren who are on the dock, and I understand him wanting it to be safe and stable for them. But I'm one of a flock of 70-year-old and plus women who, when they come home from a day of kayaking, are pretty tired. And one, you know, I'm not strong at that point. And two, sometimes I'm flailing a little bit with my paddle, and sometimes my paddle is 3 feet above my head or 3 feet above the kayak, and it can be dangerous. And I just want to be assured that I want to know how this, it doesn't sound like it'll affect the currents very much, but I want to know that there's a safe distance between me when I'm aiming into the slot to land my kayak, between me and the dock. And the third thing is the birds. It's an area where there's a lot of nesting birds, a lot of feeding birds. There are several kinds of egrets. There are the great blue herons who are there a lot, and others as well. And while I was fascinated by the description of how the pier and dock will be laid, it sounded really cool. I wonder how long it will take and how loud it will be. And if it's going to be of any, if it's going to be too intrusive, if when this structure is built, it could be delayed until October at the end of nesting season.
Okay. I heard you mentioned kayaking and birds. The first issue that you were talking about, could you just
Moorings.
Moorings. Okay, perfect. I can address all of those. Granted. Well, I can tell you my experience in other towns with moorings and what my opinion is of the harbor master's jurisdiction. So in most of the towns that I work in, which is everywhere in the Cape, every homeowner is allowed a mooring, assuming it fits out there, okay? So in front of your house, you would be allowed a mooring. In front of anybody else's house, they'd be allowed one mooring. I think Bernie has a mooring here, which means that mooring leaves and goes away and is replaced by the dock. Now, the advantage to having a dock, every mooring, the boat is on a swing radius, right? And it swings around its mooring in high tide and between high and low tide, depending on the wind, it swings around. If the mooring block is 20-something feet and you have a 20-foot boat, you have a 40-foot circle that this boat is swinging around at any given time with the wind. With a dock, the boat doesn't move. It sits there. You don't have to try to avoid it because it's not moving. So there's a real good advantage to having a fixed place for a boat to be as opposed to a mooring field. And so I wouldn't worry about you not being able to have a mooring, because everybody should be able to have one in front of their own property. Yeah, go.
All right. Okay, since I'm next to the Durantes, you're right. I probably can get a mooring. I don't know. But there are a lot of other people in the neighborhood who aren't on the water. The people across the street from me, they have access. You know, it's a common launch site. do the people across the street of me who can't get a mooring in front of their house because they're not on the water, can they get a mooring? Right now they can. If, we just want assurances that everybody on the street who wants a mooring can get one.
Well,
And I'm gonna interrupt there
Yeah.
because Mark can't answer that question, and neither can the commission. That would be a question for the harbor master's office.
But it's of great concern to the community.
mhm.
Mhm.
I think in short, my opinion would be that there's no reason why a dock at this site would impact anybody else's ability to get a mooring, given that the site conditions in front of where they want would work.
Okay,
But
how far is the dock going to be from the common kayak launch site?
I don't know where the common kayak launch site is. Where is that?
It's pretty close to the dock.
I believe it's south of the dock at the.
It's just south of the dock. And that's something that, I want to know what that distance is and the clearance for all of the kayakers.
Well, if it's south, I'm looking at the plan. The shoreline runs southwest.
Okay, it is southwest.
Okay, so it is, hang on one second.
If you pull up Google Earth, you can see a location where there appear to be kayaks stored that is well south of the dock site.
Okay, I see I think I see a white marking on there's a blue dashed line on the plan and there's some white things in the aerial. That could be it. If it's those, they are 185 feet away from the dock.
Well, the kayak storage is even further west of the kayak launch site.
Okay. So I don't understand where.
But I want to know that when when I'm coming back into the kayak launch site, how far, it's a slight V. I couldn't tell from your drawings exactly where it was. And I know the ground, and I'm talking from California. I won't be back in Eastham until next week. But it's not, the kayak launch site is also, I believe, below Bernie's house. It's below his land. And so I don't think it's hundreds of feet. I think it's actually a little bit close. I want to know what that distance is. And anyone in the neighborhood can show it to you, and you can tell us.
Okay, so what would be your concern if it's, let's say it's even 80 feet away, which I don't see anything like that, but let's just say it's 80 feet away, what's the concern?
If it's 80 feet away, I feel okay. If it's 40 feet away, I don't, I'm wondering, I'm thinking that maybe that's going to make me uncomfortable.
Well, it's 140 feet to his western property line. I can tell you that from the plan. From the dock, it's 140 feet. In front of Linda Sorkin, that's you.
That is me.
Okay, in front of your property on the aerial, there's a little white, looks like a couple of white shapes in front of your property. Is that roughly where
No, the kayak launch site is below Dr. Durante's house.
No,
Okay.
there should be no kayaks on my property in front of my house. All those kayaks are on your
Kayaks are
property.
not on your property, but the kayak launch site is below the mean high tide line on common ground.
I don't know where that is on the plan, ma'am. His property runs to the mean high water mark beyond.
Right. And the launch site is to the water side. The launch site is water.
And how do you get to it?
The path, there's a path that goes from Mary Chase Road by our house, in between my house and Paul Brown's house. And it goes along below the mean high tide line, to get to the kayak launch site.
Okay, well.
And it's used by the whole neighborhood.
All right, well, all I can tell you is the edge of the marsh as it runs west toward your house where Dr. Durani's property line meets the edge of the marsh is 160 feet from his dock. to the west.
Okay, then that distance is probably okay.
Yeah.
Because
So your third,
I don't think it's
Okay.
more than a third of the way in.
okay. And then the other thing you mentioned, that this also might help Hillary and Madam Chair. At low tide, you have clearance under the dock quite of 8-10 feet. At high tide, you have a minimum of 3 feet at the high tide. Having said that, though, since these pilings are 30 feet apart, the first set is 20 feet apart, and the next set it's probably another 20 feet to the edge of the salt marsh. So normal docks have spans around 14, 16 feet, give or take. So my point is that there's less pilings here because of the way it's designed. And you've got a minimum of 20 feet between those pilings. So you've got lots of horizontal area to navigate under as well.
Okay, that actually makes me feel a little bit better too, though it seems a little creepy to me to have to go underneath the dock in my kayak.
Right. Now this one, you'll have more room under this dock than any average dock that I'm aware of, that I've designed in the last 25 years.
Okay, how long will it take once you start? How long will the installation last?
So the prefabricated sections take less time because all they have to do is drive the pilings, put in the cross bracing, and then they crane the aluminum sections into place. I believe the dock at Cedar Lane was installed in less than 3 weeks.
Okay, and how loud will it be?
I can't tell you that.
Yeah, I just worry about the nesting birds.
Yeah, if this was so National Heritage has an area of concern, but it's seaward of this site. And if we were in National Heritage, we'd have to file with them. But we're not in their area of concern. So I don't know what to tell you there, but it's I don't know, why do ospreys nest on telephone poles and get zapped? I mean, birds are birds, but anyway,
Well,
I'm straying off the point. I'm sorry.
And we're running out of the comment time, and we should move along to
Okay.
additional people. But before we do that, I just want to clarify. You said that if the dock goes in, that they would not be allowed to have a mooring anymore, and I don't believe that's the case in Eastham.
Well, I wouldn't say they wouldn't be allowed to have a mooring, but if he had a mooring, he could certainly give it up if he didn't need it, if he has a place to put the boat.
Right, but that doesn't preclude putting a mooring back in later. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I guess. Right. I understand.
Okay. Are there other abutters who wish to speak?
And I want to say this, Ms. Sorkin, and anybody else who wants to speak, you can call me. I mean, not after this meeting, please, but at some other time, if you think of something else, just feel free to call me. I can give you my number. It's on the letterhead or anything. So.
Okay, I may call when I come back next week.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Sorry, Madam Chair.
That's okay. Gail, if you would identify yourself, please. And unmute.
Gail and David Brown, and we are not on the waterfront. We're one back, and I wanted to just expound a little bit on, the concern about the length of the dock, given that the navigation, through the dock will basically, as I try to guesstimate how far it will go out, almost goes into the channel, which is a very narrow channel. In that particular area, the sands are shifting, significantly in this part of the town cove, and it's getting narrower and narrower going through that particular channel. So, from a safety perspective, we all kayak. We do kayak a lot. Going around will put us directly in the channel with a lot of boats going, back and forth. So any consideration for shortening the dock, I think would be appreciated. And In addition, I don't know if you're aware, but already there are, at any given time, currently there's 8 moorings that are out there. Using your example, Mark, of a boat needing, 40 feet radius, the dock is obviously going to impact the placement of existing moorings, as they currently have been placed. We do have a boat out there. We've had a boat out there for a number of years. I know other people are considering boats. And I think that's one consideration, that we tried to ask in the letter. I don't know if you were given sort of our letter, but what impact will the dock have on placement of moorings? And then, safety considerations because of the access where the dock, places itself in terms of the channel and the markers. One of the markers is really basically, right out where I think the end of the dock is going to be. So from a kayaking perspective, we have all sort of stayed closer to shore. There may be times where we have to navigate around, and that is going to be a safety consideration. So wondered if that could, be factored in terms of the plans, for the dock. I think, we were just really wanting to understand what other impacts there might be on our access, because people do, everyone on the road has deeded access to that access. And as Linda explained, there is a designated spot, where we all walk so as not to impact, the marsh any further, and put our docks and our kayaks in. So, if there are going to be impacts in terms of where we can bring, that's where, all the boats that are moored, load and unload. So if we have to modify that or change that in any way, shape, or form, we wanted that to be considered and understand what the implications were.
Okay, I understand that. Where I live in Dennis, and I've been paddling up and down Bass River most of my life. And this is probably the least congested area I've ever put a dock. But as I said, there's not that many piles. So if you wanted to travel landward of the dock at high tide, you've got all kinds of options.
Right.
And at low tide, you have at least 16 feet of clear span with a minimum of 3 feet overhead. And that's if you want to go under the dock. As far as the moorings go, again, I can't speak for the harbor master. If I chose this location of the dock because this is the shortest place. This was where the available water depth was available, the closest to the shoreline. It was also the least amount of marsh to cross. So all those are considerations when I cite a dock. So yeah, moving the float landward, as we previously discussed, is difficult because of the depths. Seaward of the float, now that the survey, I'm going to say the survey only went out 200 feet, but 45 feet beyond where the float is now, the bottom still keeps getting deeper. So you're at least where this survey was done, which was right down the center line of the dock. There's sufficient water depth for very large boats, but out pretty far, 45 feet, and doesn't even start to get shallow again yet. Of course, sands move, channels move. I get that. We deal with that in Bass River all the time. The channel markers are pulled every year because they never go in the same spot every year. So having said that, there's lots of room out here, in my opinion, when I look at the aerial, when I look at the depths. As far as the mooring field goes, the moorings aren't necessarily set in an exact location. So if they need to be adjusted, they can be adjusted. But again, if this is roughly in the same place as Bernie's existing mooring, then it just replaces that space, and it shouldn't take it away from anybody else.
Can you just address for them, you've marked the moorings on the plan here, what the distance is of the moorings that you marked from the dock proposal?
Sure. There's 3 of them southwest of the dock. If I go from the float, the closest part is the float. The one at the 9-foot contour line is 65 feet away, give or take. The furthest one away at the 6-foot contour line is 125 feet away. And the closest one to land at the -2 contour line is about 100 feet away.
I'm not sure which diagram are you looking at?
This is the aerial site plan. It's on the left, upper left-hand corner.
There are 8 moorings. I don't see 8 moorings on the diagram.
Yeah, there might have been, if the other moorings might be further seaward. The surveyors just do a certain amount of distance out and around the property, so
Yeah, I'm not sure when they noticed the moorings, but
right. It could be the time of year that they did the survey too.
Right, so,
Right.
typically there's 8 moorings that are in there, so obviously the moorings are gonna have to be modified in some way, shape or form so that they don't, hit the dock, quite frankly. I know, as we have a boat, so we know what boats are out there. And so there probably would be 2 to 3 boats that would be pretty much close to where the dock is located. So I guess, are you suggesting that we speak with the harbor master to see what distance we need to be from the dock, or how that, because moorings are going to go in pretty soon.
Yeah, most of the time, these applications go, they're waved in front of the harbor master for his review. We didn't get anything back that I'm aware of from the harbor master.
Is that something that we could ask for? Clarification on how far we need to be from the docks and placement of the moorings?
Madam Chair, can I ask, was the harbor master, was he able to review this application?
I have not had any feedback. I know you did give a copy to him when you filed with us.
Yep.
But we haven't had any feedback. But I think we could probably check that before the next hearing.
Okay.
That would be very appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else from you, Gail?
I did send a letter in,
And
through Alex,
the commission did receive all of the abutters letters. I will run through them briefly.
Okay,
I thought I would give everybody who's here a chance to talk first.
Sure.
But we did receive the letters, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else who's at the meeting who would like to speak? Okay, Hillary?
I just have one thought comment that's not necessarily related to the dock, but to this kayak issue. And Alex and I were out there, and I did see the channel, and it does appear like the channel, as it currently stands, is on the applicant's property. And it looks like there are a few boats stored there and a few boats, or several boats, depending on which aerial photograph you look at from what year. Several boats get stored out there. Some are still out there now, so it looks like some of them don't even get removed in the off season. So I think that's just another issue that we may want to consider, not necessarily as part of this application, but potentially a boat rack or a seasonal boat storage limit, because some of them have been sitting out there all year round. So just something that came to mind while we were on the site visit.
I'd be happy to design and permit a kayak rack for them.
I think we were told.
I would love that.
We were told that we couldn't build a kayak rack out there.
Oh.
At least that's what I heard via George Burgess, who.
A kayak rack on our property?
No, a kayak rack probably on our property.
Oh, that's fine with me.
That would require that would require the filing of an application, and then
Right.
we could review it. So the only way you can determine whether you can have one or not is by speaking to us with an application.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other, Hillary, anything else? Or your hand's just still?
Nope, I'm putting it down.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Anything else from the commission? Okay. So it appears that we will, anything else from you, Mark?
No, I don't think so. I just want to leave it open if either Gail or Ms. Horkin want to call me separately, that's fine. I'm interested to see where this launch system area is, and I have some field work I have to do in Chatham, but you know, separately
If you
coordinate
can
that.
delay it, if you can delay it to May 1st, I'll show you, I'm happy to show it to you.
Why don't you call me when you know you're going to be around, and we'll
Okay.
set something up.
Okay, and before we move on, I want to make note of the fact that the commission did receive 4 comment letters. One from David F. Brown and Gail T. Brown at 335 Mary Chase Road. One from Paul B. Brown at 305 Mary Chase Road. One from Janine Furr and Mohammed Abazari at 245 Mary Chase Road, and one from Linda Sorkin at 275 Mary Chase Road. And those are public record and would be available at the conservation office if you want to read them, but I will just quickly characterize them that they, the topics covered and the concerns covered in the letters were very much echoed and repeated by the comments we heard tonight.
Okay. Madam Chair, may I ask if you could forward the copies of those letters to me, please?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you very much.
So with the shellfish survey being done on the 28th and 29th, looks like we should continue this meeting to our May 13th date. And I just want to let the abutters know that you are more than welcome to come to that meeting. You will not receive a separate notice of that meeting. And if that changes or to find out the time and so on, you should check the agenda posted on the town calendar, which would be the Friday before the meeting. Okay, if we could have a motion from the commission to continue this to May 13th.
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Okay, Mike,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate the abutters and neighbors coming to share their questions and comments with us.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Night, Bernie. See you next week.
See you next week, Linda.
Okay. Give me a second because I've lost my agenda again. Okay, and that I think concludes all of the applications before us, and we'll now turn to the minutes from April 8th, 2025. Has everybody had a chance to review those? Are there any corrections, comments, etc.?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Would somebody make a motion to approve and a second, please?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Mike,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay. Violations. We don't have Alex to talk with us. Hillary, do you have anything on violations that we should discuss?
One violation at 150 Old State Highway with the installation of a dock and a piece of machinery running down over the marsh grass. I did not bring it up during the regular hearings because it was a separate matter. I know Alex observed the remnants of it from the site visits this morning because that was the opportunity we had to get out there. So I think we have to think about how we're going to handle that. I think that may be just another letter sent to the attorney's office and for a request to come and talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, liaison report. The Open Space Committee is meeting tomorrow. The Strategic Planning Committee is planning to have a public comment on the strategic plan sometime in May. If you give me 1 second, I'll tell you the 2 proposed dates. We haven't quite settled yet. Paul Lag is looking to arrange for some childcare to be available during the comment period. And I think that hopefully will allow more people to join us. Okay, so that would be either May 22nd or May 14th. There'll be 2 sessions on one of those 2 days. There is a strategic planning update and a review of the new plan in the back of the town meeting warrant, which I know has been sent out, and you all should have that at some point soon. And I think that's it for me. Mike, anything from the Forest Committee?
We did a planting this weekend, the prior weekend. I was off Cape, so I missed it. So I have to find out what we planted.
Okay.
It was the ground stuff that we talked about before, you know, the fern,
Mhm.
maybe hair grass, but I'm not sure how much or what yet.
Okay. Hillary?
Sorry, I just want to say that we will be having a special town meeting to vote on funding for wastewater collection and treatment in June, the end of June. And so I guess I'd like the opportunity to invite some of the consultants to one of our meetings to give a presentation, or I would give it myself just so that you are aware of what's being proposed and what the plan is.
I think we'd appreciate that. So I do know that the special town meeting is on June 23rd and the special election will be on the 24th.
Yes.
So
we'll get that scheduled for an upcoming meeting.
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay, and then education and training updates. Anybody got anything they want to share? Okay, that leaves us with other discussion, which will be saltwater dock regulations. So I hope you've all had time to review the most recent draft and the reader's notes. And I'll ask for any comments. Oh, I also should mention that I did just get a comment from Stephanie Sykes, who is our shellfish constable, on how they do shellfish surveys. And I haven't had an opportunity to share that, but let me just quickly run through it. I had the current draft says that shellfish surveys should be compliant with DMF shellfish methods. And Stephanie wrote that their current survey practices for the town are, instead of measuring individual animals, we recommend classifying by market size, which is feed, little neck, cherrystone, chowder, as that's what the town and DMF currently use in their survey methods, and that the Shellfish Department does not currently use quadrats for their surveys or DMF surveys. Instead, they dig approximately a 1 square foot sample along a transect every X number of feet determined by the service area, and DMF has that randomly placed to make sure that they adequately cover the entire site. And she says she's not sure how they select random places. And she's guessing that you cover the entire site, but it's not clear in the wording. And then while surveying potential aquaculture sites with DMF, they examine at least 41 square foot samples per acre. And then DMF has density thresholds for cohogs, for example, 1 animal per square foot. And let's see. And the other one has to do with the previous iteration. So there is that. Hillary, your hand's up.
Not intentionally, I'm putting it down.
Okay. So I think you all can kind of unmute and we'll just talk on this instead of hands up and so on, as long as you don't talk over each other. So I propose maybe that we think about this a little more. We can do an update even after the public hearing and figure out what we want there. But in terms of the other changes and comments in the draft, I'm looking for your comments, feedback, etc. We could start with definitions on the first page here, because I think it makes sense to align them. Between freshwater and saltwater, so we don't have multiple definitions running around that could confuse people. But don't all speak at once.
I think it made sense, Karen, and it's logical. So I don't know that there's much discussion for that.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I'll just do that. I have to do a red line document for the public hearing because we'll have to do a public hearing on that little change. Okay, any going through the rest of it? Any comments, thoughts, yes or no's to the changes?
It's a silly question. Like, it's very Monty Python for me, where it's like the revision of the definition of dock is great, and then it says piers see docks, and then later on it says piers and docks, but it says piers see docks. So are piers and docks the same thing? So yes. I am not enough of an expert to conclusively say that docks and piers are the same thing, but are they? Because this makes
for the purposes of this regulation, they are the same thing.
Same thing.
And I believe I wrote that in the statement of applicability.
Oh, is it in there? Okay, because maybe I just like my brain skipped that part because I just
applicability.
wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something or that we weren't being
Yeah, the last line of applicability says for the purposes of this regulation, dock and pier shall be used interchangeably.
Okay. All right, it's there somewhere. Okay, thank you.
And yeah, some of these were I think aligning them with the definitions from the draft one kind of tends to fix some of that dock pier.
Got it.
Whatever. And sometimes it's dock and piers, and sometimes it's docks and pier. But hey, I think we fixed that here. And then looking into the other more substantive issues, I highlighted them in red for you. So, and Alex and I did talk with Alex W. and sorted things out. So we did drop the 25-foot setback from the property line because Alex was very adamant that really has nothing to do with wetlands. But we agreed that the other setbacks for navigation channel and beaches and boat ramps and stuff had to do with recreation, so we could keep those. And he was okay with the more generic language for toxic and leaching. We did add in the no commercial usage, which I had thought was in the original, but somehow got lost during one of the edits.
Do we need to define? So you kind of define it here, but you just thinking out loud. Do we need
commercial now
around commercial purposes, or is that sufficient? Did you like Hillary and Alex and you? Do you think that's sufficient?
Well, Alex and I talked about it, and we thought that was okay.
Okay.
But after we finish here, it'll get another pass through Alex W.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just thinking there could be all kinds of kind of like hybrid people doing it kind of sort of to make some extra money. And is that commercial or you know, I don't know.
Okay, that was in general, number XIV. Okay.
Yeah.
Docks shall not be used for commercial purposes, including but not limited to. Should
Rental, boat
cover
cleaning, and
other
fishing. Yeah.
that not limited to tends to cover a myriad of things.
Can you read the rest of the statement of what's
Okay, so,
included and not limited to?
Docks shall not be used for commercial purposes, including but not limited to rental, boat cleaning and repair, and fishing.
So if I go, so for example, like my husband and I have this conversation a lot. He doesn't actually like fish, but he likes fishing.
Yes.
So
Fishing has its own charm.
Right. Whatever that's worth. Let's say I go and I catch a bunch of fish, but I don't like fish, so I decide to sell my fish to one of the local.
You can't do that. You don't have the right license.
So you can't do that.
You can't do that. Yeah, no. You can't.
You need a commercial fishing license for that. But it goes on all the time, I'm sure.
So can the boat owner clean their boat at their dock as long as they don't do it for some retail purpose, right?
Yeah, and we have language about non-toxic stuff around the dock. So
yeah, okay.
The idea being that commercial use is more impactful overall.
Right. Oh, right. No, a lot more action on a commercial place, whereas the homeowner who owns a dock cleans his boat, goes under, scrubs it out, just with get the slime off or something.
Yeah, I've done that more than a few times with a boat.
Yeah. And Alex Bates and I had a conversation recently with Chapter 91 about what commercial means in their eyes, because they sometimes write that into their approval letters. And I had gone back and forth in my mind about what that meant. Does that mean commercial fishing activities, or does that mean like personal commercial endeavors? And it actually means personal commercial endeavors and commercial fishing operations and those types of things. So it covers both in the eyes of Chapter 91, which I had sort of fought with myself about what that actually meant.
Would you want to add a sentence that's like this includes personal, I like the way you said it, personal commercial endeavors.
Yeah, I don't know how else to like
I don't know if that's
phrase it,
helpful. Is that
So
helpful?
is that like a sole operator as opposed to a business with employees?
It sounds like my idea about like me selling my husband's fish that he doesn't want to eat is a personal commercial endeavor, right? That's me personally.
That's one we do not want to know about, so we don't have to do anything about it.
No, we don't.
So this seems to align
I do not have
really
a boat.
So this would align pretty well with the Chapter 91, but give us local enforcement on it.
Yes.
Which is the intent. And even if they decide to allow commercial purposes, we do not. So that would make us stricter. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else? I changed the language around the sign. That includes strolling.
Right. I saw that and I was wondering, I mean, so I just want to understand it. So in Chapter 91, it says that you can stroll below the high tide line and above the low tide line.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Chapter 91, I went and looked this up because of what you discussed at the work session. So Chapter 91 is granting somebody who wants to put a dock in somewhat exclusive use to public waterways. The state has interest in there's a public trust doctrine, and the state has interest in certain aspects like fishing, fouling, navigation, but it also controls the waterways as opposed to the land underwater. So these colonial ordinances have to do with the land portion of it, not the water portion of it.
Right.
So in a trade-off between allowing a private entity to build a dock that takes away from public use, there is a trade-off.
So what happens when they move to the next property? I'm just talking about strolling along a marsh seems to be damaging. I'm not as concerned about the legal part, but it seems like, do we really want to encourage people to walk along the edge of the water along a marsh? As you know what I mean? That's all.
Yeah, well, we're not allowed to stop them per se.
So,
People have a right of access. So,
but in this case, where the dock is and the frontage for where that dock is, I can see that they've given up something to get something. I understand. But when they move to the next property, does that mean they can stroll on the next property?
well, that's beyond me. But the question
It's
was
not important.
the access given a dock. So
Yeah.
I don't want to weigh in on land use
Gotcha.
laws and things beyond the immediate discussion. But you had asked, and I went and looked, and
Well, thank you.
I can give you a reference to some documents if you want, but yeah. Okay.
I did have a question about the 48 inches.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that again.
Yeah. Like in this case, if we go 48 inches, they're going to want to go farther out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I understand it and you want to protect the bottom, but I mean, I know the next time we do this, if we say 48 inches, I mean, then they got to go out 150 feet and they're going to fight for that.
Well, what about if we take I was reading the DMF letter on the dock we just talked about, and they were talking about wanting to maintain for the barge working on the dock a 2-foot clearance between the bottom of the skeg and the substrate.
Yeah.
So what if we change that to requiring a 2-foot clearance between the bottom of the engine skeg or the keel, and leave it for discussion at the time of permitting?
And the problem I see is it's hard to manage that because the skegs can be at different heights. And when you have a fixed structure, you can control that.
Right. It's all hard to manage though, because once you permit, people will rejigger as they will. We know that's true. We can only say this is what we want, but yeah. But it didn't seem to make, when I went back and looked at the 2 different sections that we talked about this and our discussion, and then I combined them into this one here on page 11. It made less sense to me than when we were talking about it. So, but
it's 30 inches now.
It's 2.5 feet above mean low water.
Right.
30 inches. But and our friend tonight said over shellfish, but really it's also vegetation that we have to worry about, and sediment and so on. Yeah. So I'm asking what you guys want to do here, and Hillary will take your suggestions too, of course.
I'm torn on this one. I feel like I don't know enough about boating and big boats to like weigh in sensibly.
Yeah, well, I've been in a big boat. Well, let's just say 32 feet. Let's just say 32 feet. I've been in a 32-foot sailboat with a inboard engine and a centerboard. So the boat itself had a draft of 3.4 feet, but with the centerboard down, it was 9 feet. So we could go in lots of really small places, but even with the keel at 3.4 feet, if we anchored in the wrong place, we'd bump bottom continually as we bobbed at anchor and moorings tend to be deeper than that in general for a boat that size. So it really depends on the size of the boat that's being used, and certainly outboard engines have a certain depth that the propeller and skeg drop to, depending upon the size of the engine. So that's why, to me, it made more sense to require a certain clearance between the bottom of the keel or in the bottom of the propeller skeg, rather than setting this at a minimum float height. But the float height is enforceable, and the clearance between the bottom of the boats is not really.
No, you could have different size boats, different types of boats, different propeller types. There's a lot of variables that would just be difficult. And
I'm wondering if maybe the size of the float, because remember, like, Greg, wouldn't you want a bigger float if you had a bigger boat? Or can you float a boat on a smaller float?
Yeah,
you technically could, because the
boat,
the,
you want to
the boat has its own buoyancy, so you could actually tie up a fairly big boat at a very small dock, particularly if you throw out a stern anchor that kept it aligned, which I've done.
So, I mean, if we have a 20 by 10, I mean, you can tie up to that with a good sized boat, a 25-foot boat.
Yeah.
Boat. But, you know.
And we are limiting the berthing location to the seaward end of the float too. So
totally real question. Is there a limitation on the size of a boat that could that's allowed to transit Town Cove?
No.
I don't think so.
Like, if you get stuck, it's your own freaking problem.
Right, exactly.
It is, and I've had that experience too, because my father liked to sail by feel. We joke. How many outgoing tides did we get stuck in? And surprisingly, getting out in Chatham Harbor to push a 25-foot sailboat off a sandbar.
So then it does sound like we can't control, like, you could make the height as tall as you want, and then you're still going to end up with big boats, right?
We could limit the size of the boat.
Unless you want to limit the size of the boat, which is like, that's another discussion for another time, I guess. But I guess we're trying to find that balance, right, with the ability, how long these docks and piers are going to end up being. It's like, as I think, were you saying, Greg, like, if you increase the height, right, you're going to have to get farther out.
At this location, he might go out many more feet to get 48 inches. Right now, he's got 36.
But we do limit the length of the dock.
That's right. 20% of the channel width, or the narrowest width, right?
So are we going to not be, if we do that, are we going to be okay saying no potentially more frequently to, because I don't know if this guy, for example, in the case of Governor Forest, like, if the guy couldn't figure it out, then it's a no. You can't get 48. If you can't get 48 inches clearance within, 150 feet, or can't remember when we made it, then it doesn't go. We don't approve it.
I don't know.
Then they would argue, then maybe they would argue that they're going to use this like a sailboat with a shallow draft. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. Let me just pull this up on my iPad for a second.
Yeah, I understood that the state or whoever regulates the stuff said it's 30 inches for docks, for dock floats, right? So we're interested in making that more conservative.
Yeah, if we should, so.
Yeah, and at least in the Cove, I mean, we don't have a lot of docks in other places, I don't think, but in the Cove, they're gonna, at least in some spots, they're gonna want to push it out farther.
So we have a maximum dock length here of 125 feet beyond mean high water.
Oh, okay.
A maximum width of 4 feet and a maximum float size of 200 square feet.
So what happens at 125 when you can't get 48 inches? They don't get a dock?
They don't get a dock.
They'd have to they'd have to think about the engineering, like if it was a step down kind of thing for the dock.
Do they get a dock with a lift? Maybe. Do they get a dock with a lift?
Well, we do allow manual boat lifts.
Right, but when they use a manual boat lift, they're gonna drop it down as fast as the tide.
Or you're gonna have to do something like you're gonna have to step up and then go out, and then you know what I mean.
a manual boat lift is on a winch, I would think that for safety and leverage, it would have winch stops. That if you let it
Yeah.
out too quickly, it would stop it.
No, yeah, I understand that, but I'm thinking of just as a boat owner, and I'm on a mooring, so I get 6 hours. I have to wait 6 hours to get out because because it's on the beach for 6 hours. It's dry. But here, if you were on the cove and you have the tide coming in, and the tide's deep enough for your boat, you're gonna put it down as soon as you can get out. You're not gonna wait an hour to get my 48 inches. You're gonna just put it in. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the reality. And sometimes we have to push them out. Sometimes people will walk behind the boat and push it out as the tide's coming in just to get out.
Mhm.
So these,
Well, there's a difference if you're doing that in the bay where it's a sandy substrate and you're not disturbing vegetation than in Town Cove, for
Right.
example. But still, and you're not running. If you're pushing, you're not running the prop, so you're not doing propeller
Right.
dredging or scour. So
I'm just talking like human nature would be tide's coming in. I have a
Mhm.
48-inch dock, and the tide's coming in, and it's got 2 feet of water. I can get in there with 2 feet of water, jack the engine up a little bit, and just like a hydro. You know what I mean? You've seen them.
well,
The tail.
your float is at 3 feet because of the float stops. So how's that going to work for your boat when you come in? You're going to reach up a foot and tie it off and not worry about it.
Probably.
And then the lines will be loose, and once the tide comes in, you'll be banging against the boat and hoping your bumpers do their job, your fenders do their job.
I don't know.
So
The question is whether or not we could get, I think the real question is whether or not we could get challenged on this and lose. Because the state, Hillary, go ahead.
But I was going to say probably yes, but we can get challenged on anything
And
depending
lose.
on
Oh, yeah,
who
I
we're
guess
up against. And we're up against some really important people, and they will challenge us. And I think our saving grace is that whatever we do, we've run it through town council, and they feel confident that we can put it on the books. So,
Mhm. And we are allowed to be stricter than the state. So this is.
I'm
But
trying to say, like, not being a boat person, I do think there's a way to engineer getting 48 inches. I agree with Greg, though, that people will be people and they'll find ways, but getting 48 actually, it means at least like, because maybe they do 2 feet if it was 30 inches.
Well,
and now they
today's
would
doc
give it
wouldn't
2.5 feet if they're doing 48 inches. So at least we'll get everything's moved up a little bit, right?
today's doc would not. Oh, I'm not going to talk about that because
Right.
that's still open. But
Yeah, let's not do that. But like, I think I'd say let's go for it, because worst case scenario, the shenanigans will be at least a little bit elevated beyond what they would have been originally, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking that once we set our public hearing, which I'm hoping we can do tonight, that we would circulate a copy of this also to those engineers that have had a dock in front of us recently and get their feedback as well ahead of the hearing, and see if they make some strong arguments that we want to listen to.
Okay. I'm good with it.
Okay, so we're leaving the 48. Anything else in here? Mike, you have to pull the microphone in front of you.
Might not be on.
Is it on?
on.
You've been really,
Oh, yeah, there
really
you go.
quiet. You've been really quiet all night unless you're leaning right into it. So
How do we define a navigation channel? The regulation says no dock shall be 100 feet of a navigation channel. Is that the center or is that an end point? And how do we define an end point? Is there a certain depth? Like the dock tonight, I have no idea where the navigation channel is.
it's not where the abutters said it was, but I don't think we should be talking about tonight's dock.
Well, forget tonight's dock. How do you define a navigation channel? What's the end point? If it was a stream, we'd see the end of the stream bank. The navigation channel is out underwater. How do I know where it is? How
Mm.
you say you, so one of the things is you're saying, well, if we do 4 feet, the docks will stick out 300 feet to get out there, but we don't even, how can we define where a navigation channel is? What is the definition? How do you know where it is? How do you know, is it a certain depth? It's gotta be 9 feet, 10 feet or more? I have no idea. So I don't even know what this regulation means.
That's true, and we don't actually have buoys marking a designated channel in Town Cove.
Yeah.
But I bet Harbor Master could help us define that.
Yeah.
Oh, we
Mike,
can't hear
Mike, we can't, Mike, we can't hear you. You got to be right with the microphone
going
right
home.
pointing. Okay.
I agree.
So
We need to define this.
Here.
well, I think we can define that when we get to the discussion at the public hearing.
Gonna have
We
to
can
know
talk
the
to,
answer before that.
well, we don't actually have to know the answer before that because we can make changes after the public hearing if we want to define it further or delete it.
Fine.
I would like, if you are in agreement, to move this forward to a public hearing. And as I said, we can make changes after we get public comments, or we could adopt that as, or whatever. But I think it would be useful for us to have dock regulations in place sooner rather than later.
Yeah, me too. Go with
Yeah.
the public hearing, but we gotta have an answer for that.
Okay,
Maybe we can get clarification on it and bring it with us to the public hearing. So that
Mhm.
becomes like
yeah,
we have
and
it
the
ready.
same thing with the shellfish regulations.
The harbor master will know the answer to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll run this by them because it seems like we've settled on some a final draft for public comment.
And maybe we add navigational channel to the definition section so it's clear to anyone reading it what it is if none of us can really define it.
Yeah, but I will say that the Natural Resources Department is in favor of requiring that docks do not interfere with the navigation channel because we did get that comment back.
Yes.
Okay. Definition. I will pursue that. So Alex and I talked about a possible date for the public hearing, and if we vote to move it to that, it takes 21 days of public notice prior. So we thought we might be able to do it at our second meeting in May, which is the 27th. That we could do it as we have in the past, before the regular meeting, or we could have a separate meeting on a different date for a public hearing.
Is there a way for us to notify people that might be interested in this, just to get some comment?
Well, I always put all of our public hearings out on all the Eastham related Facebook pages several times. And it is we can ask Jackie or Kayla or whoever to put it on the town website ahead.
Yep.
And we can just send it off to specifically to the Independent and see if they'll put it in their Eastham section.
Sure.
But,
I always worry that people claim they didn't know this was happening. They never heard about it, and I just
you get that marquee. You know the marquee by the fire station.
Yes,
put it there because I pay attention to that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could also
regulation meeting. See website.
We could just make a quick little flyer and tack it up at the library and in the lobby of town hall.
Yeah,
well.
I feel like we just struggle sometimes with like outreach about things, and I mean, I know we do what is required, but
Well, yeah, and then I do a little more than that, but
yeah,
but people are not necessarily paying attention to regulation changes
exactly.
until they're interested in doing a project.
Yes, I know.
So-
I know.
so-
I always want us to try to do a little bit better, and sometimes it's just not possible. I get it.
And-
but
and-
I'm telling you that flashing sign, I forget stuff all the time and I'm like, oh shoot, that's right, town meeting's coming up, or like I'm supposed to vote on Tuesday.
Well, the PT wood change was in the independent,
Mhm.
and that didn't get us any comments either. Of course, we were just
No,
basically
I
saying
know,
we're
you're
not
right,
doing this.
you're right.
We're getting so yeah.
We'll just stay the course then. That's
Karen,
fine.
how about
So-
I have one of those Tyrannosaurus Rex costumes for Halloween, like the blow up ones. They run the.
Are you volunteering?
I'll go out on the windmill, on the green with a sign, and I'm sure I can get you at least like 3 people to show up.
Yeah. Okay, but we're gonna go with the public notice. We're gonna ask Kayla to put it on the front page of the website. I'm gonna do the social media thing, and we can do a flyer tacked up at town hall and the library. Anything else? Do we want to send?
Say no to
I
the
can send.
T-Rex. No to the T-Rex.
I can send an email to the Part-Time Resident Taxpayers Association, just giving them a heads up,
Hmm.
or not.
I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do anything beyond what we normally do. I think about it a lot, but maybe we just do the same thing.
You know, I worry about people not knowing, but then you put stuff out, and I can tell you with the tea time stuff, you put stuff out, you put stuff out, you put stuff out, and there will always be some not insignificant segment of the population that says, I didn't know what's going on with tea time. What's going on with tea time? And that could be 2 days after you've blanketed the place with
Yes.
notices. So
All right, I'm looking at Mike's face when he said he wanted to go home 15 minutes
yes.
ago. So
Okay. So would
maybe we can
somebody
get him
make
out of there.
would somebody make a motion to move this draft to public hearing?
I'll make a motion to move this draft to public hearing.
And is there a
Second.
second? Okay, Greg. Say yes or no.
He's frozen.
He's frozen. Okay, Joanne,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
I'm a yes, and Greg is frozen, so we just lost our quorum.
No.
Does that mean we can't adjourn afterwards?
Yes, we can't
We're
adjourn.
perpetually stuck
and-
here.
But
Yeah,
he seemed in favor of it, so
You can get
Somebody-
him after the fact, documented in an email that he said yes.
Just
All
as
right.
we lost him.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll take care of that. And then Greg, you back?
Nope.
Maybe the chat feature?
The chat feature of the meeting, that would be okay.
Meeting is being recorded.
There you go. Is he back, Greg?
I'm back.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
I
So
just-
we had a motion and a second to move this to a public hearing, and we just need your yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then if somebody wants to make a motion to adjourn
I'll make
Motion
a
to
motion.
adjourn.
and a second, I think
Second.
everybody will say second.
Second.
Okay, motion
Good
carried.
night.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody. It was a long night. You